Greg Daniels had a 15-second window before his mother's private army smashed through the bathroom door. He could already hear them assembling on the other side. The scuff of heavy boots, the hiss of radio chatter, and the cold, hard snap of a magazine being seated in a rifle. Rifles. His own mother had dispatched armed men to escort him to a brunch date. "Mr. Daniels." Davidson, her head of security, hammered his fist against the wood. "Sir, your mother is becoming impatient. Miss Montgomery and her family are already seated." "You have to come out," the voice commanded. Greg's eyes darted around the opulent bathroom, searching for an escape. He was trapped on the 20th floor of his own damn penthouse with only one window. And unless he sprouted wings in the next 10 seconds, that was a dead end. "Think, you idiot, think." His gaze fell upon the decorative air vent. "Absolutely not," he breathed as the door rattled under a heavy blow. Bang, bang, bang. "Mr. Daniels, we are entering on the count of 3. Greg ripped the vent cover from the wall. He shoved his head into the opening. It was a no-go, far too narrow. 1. Then a flash of brilliance cut through his panic. The service elevator. The one she knew nothing about. The one he'd secretly installed for exactly this kind of emergency. 2. Greg exploded from the bathroom, tearing through his bedroom and into the cavernous walk-in closet straight for the hidden panel. 3. The bathroom door splintered from its hinges just as Greg vanished behind the panel, slamming it securely behind him. He could hear Davidson's muffled roar. "He's gone! Search the closet! Check every inch of this place!" Greg wasn't sticking around to listen. He jabbed the elevator button, praying for a miracle. The lift arrived with a soft chime. Greg dove inside, hammering the garage-level button at least 17 times. Come on, please," he muttered as the door slid shut just as he heard Davidson yell, "There, the elevator." Through the gap, Greg saw them charging as the floor numbers began their descent. 20th floor, 19th, 18th. His phone vibrated violently. A text from the Queen herself. "Gregory Daniels, if you humiliate me again, I will erase you from this family so thoroughly no one will remember your name." He swiped it away without reading the rest. It was the same old threat, a tired recording he'd heard 1,000 times before. But there was something fundamental his high society mother failed to grasp about her son. Long before his father made a fortune in real estate 15 years ago, Greg was just a kid from rural Georgia. He knew how to track a deer, rebuild an engine, and more importantly, how to vanish without a trace. The elevator chimed its doors parting to reveal the concrete expanse of the garage. His Audi R8 sat waiting. The keys were already in the ignition. He'd mapped out this entire escape 3 days prior. He launched himself into the driver's seat, the engine screaming to life, as he tore out of the parking structure, leaving a trail of burning rubber. A glance in the rear view confirmed that 3 black Suburbans were glued to his bumper. "Persistent, aren't we?" Greg chuckled, whipping the wheel and weaving through the chaos of Atlanta rush hour. He was driving blind with no endgame in sight. The only goal was to vanish long enough for his mother's fury to subside, and for her to call off this ridiculous motorcade. He yanked the car right, diving into the downtown grid. They mirrored his every move. Another sharp left, and still they were on him. He needed people. A crowd to get lost in. He needed a place with crowds, a place so beneath her notice that her people would never consider it. And then he saw it. West Side Market. A sprawling open-air pavilion teeming with vendors, shoppers, and glorious, beautiful chaos. It was perfect. Greg yanked the wheel, whipping the Audi into the packed parking lot. He ditched the supercar behind a rusty delivery truck, snagged a faded Braves cap from the back seat, and strode into the heart of the market. The aromas enveloped him instantly. The scent of fried chicken, fresh collard greens, and the unmistakable sweetness of someone's grandmother's peach cobbler. For a fleeting moment, he was back in the sweltering Georgia countryside, back before the world went sideways. "Found him." The voice sliced through the market chatter, sharp and cold. Davidson. Ice shot through Greg's veins. He plunged into the throng of shoppers, a desperate blur of motion between stalls hunting for any kind of cover. His eyes darted around, assessing and dismissing. The vegetable stand, far too exposed. The clothing rack was a death trap. Then tucked away in a corner, his gaze landed on her at a fish fry stall. Her back was to him, her entire being focused on butterflying a massive catfish with the surgical precision of an artist. Her hair pulled away from her face in a no-nonsense ponytail. Faded jeans and a t-shirt emblazoned with Carter's fish fry seemed to be her uniform. But when she angled her head just so to reach for a spice shaker, the air vanished from Greg's lungs. Even from 50 feet away, with only a glimpse of her profile, a strange, crushing pressure began to build in his chest. It was an impossible flicker of recognition, a phantom memory of knowing her that made absolutely no sense. Thought evaporated. Instinct took over. He moved. Jasmine Carter's morning was proceeding without a hitch, right up until a complete stranger breached her prep station. Not open yet, she announced, not bothering to turn. She was deep in the zone, methodically working her blade, and splitting a catfish demanded her full attention. The scar tissue that had sealed her left eye shut decades ago meant she had zero room for error with depth perception. Please return in 20 minutes. I really need your help. The voice was a low, urgent rumble, and it was entirely too close. Jasmine whirled around the filleting knife coming up reflexively in her grip, and then she went utterly still. The man in her space was tall and solid with warm dark skin and a meticulously kept beard, but it was his eyes that ensnared her, a bizarre cocktail of raw panic and wry amusement. He was wearing a pair of designer jeans that likely cost more than her rent for the month, paired with a plain white t-shirt that fit him like it was tailor-made. But his expensive clothes weren't what made her heart hammer against her ribs. It was the impact, a psychic blow to her soul, a jolt of knowing someone she had never ever met. It was as if her very bones remembered a man her mind insisted was a total stranger. So why did looking at him feel like a homecoming? It was a question that impossibly was also tearing through Greg. The woman before him was beautiful. Not just pretty, it was the kind of arresting beauty that could stop traffic. The jagged scar that sliced across her left eye, sealing it forever, did nothing to diminish it. If anything, it only drew your attention to her right eye, a deep, searching brown that seemed to peer directly into his core. She had a heart-shaped face with full, expressive lips, high cheekbones, just like he slammed the door on that thought before it could drown him. But her beauty wasn't what had him paralyzed. It was the violent arrhythmia she caused in his chest. It was the sudden, gut-wrenching certainty that he had spent his entire life looking for a woman he didn't know existed. Do I know you? The words tumbled out of Greg before he could stop them. I swear we've met. Jasmine blinked, the strange connection shattering like glass. I'm fairly certain I'd recall a man in $1,000 jeans invading my kitchen. Right, sorry. But the apology felt hollow. The feeling that he knew her was a hook buried deep in his gut. An eternity seemed to pass in the heavy silence between them, a current of inexplicable energy arcing in the space they shared. Excuse me. Jasmine finally bit out, her eyebrow arching with impatience. Was there an invitation I missed for you to be back here? No. Greg admitted, his gaze flicking back toward the parking lot where several large men in suits were sweeping through the market with predatory intent. But I have a very good reason for needing to disappear. Immediately. Oh, you running from the law? Jasmine's knuckles went white around the handle of her knife. Don't let her small frame or the milky scar over her blind eye deceive you. 3 years holding down a stall in this market meant she knew how to handle herself. Worse, the man admitted, a faint smile twisting his lips that made Jasmine's stomach flip. My mother. Jasmine blinked. Your what? My mother. She is trying to physically force me onto a date with a woman I have never laid eyes on. So she sent her private army to drag me there. Private army. Jasmine gave the men in suits a much harder look. They certainly fit the bill. The earpieces, the rigid board-like posture, the suits that cost more than her rent. Who is your mother, the damn president? Sometimes she genuinely believes she is. Before Jasmine could reply, one of the suits shouted, Excuse me, miss. Have you seen a tall black man about 6'2", expensive clothes run through here? The man next to Jasmine went completely still. Jasmine's gaze shifted from the security detail back to the stranger concealed in her workspace. She had absolutely no clue who this man was or what he was truly running from. But she'd been running this stand in this market for 3 long years. And in that time, she'd learned one thing. She despised people who swaggered around like they owned the ground everyone else walked on. And these security guys were drenched in that exact kind of arrogance. On top of that, there was something in the way the stranger had looked at her, not with the usual pity for her scarred face. He hadn't looked at her like she was broken goods. He'd looked at her like she was somebody. That sealed it. A tall fella in expensive clothes. She called back to the men. Yeah, I saw him. Headed that way toward the east exit. Looked like he had the devil on his heels. The team of suits instantly changed course, breaking into a near jog in the direction Jasmine had pointed. The man beside her exhaled a shaky breath. Thank you. You have no idea how much I... Don't thank me yet. Jasmine cut him short, turning to face him, her arms folded across her chest. The filleting knife was still gripped in her hand, and she angled it so the morning light caught the blade. Now you're gonna tell me what the hell is going on, or I'll call those thugs back. And believe me, I can scream loud enough to wake the dead. The man raised his hands in a gesture of pure surrender. Fair enough. My name is Greg Daniels. He announced it like the name itself was a credential. It meant nothing to her. Okay, Greg Daniels, Jasmine repeated slowly. Why are you running from your mommy's bodyguards through Westside Market at 7 o'clock in the morning? Because if they get their hands on me, they will literally haul me to a brunch where my mother is attempting to arrange my marriage to her friend's daughter. This is the fourth setup this month. Jasmine just stared at him. Your mother is arranging your marriage. Forced engagements, technically. Forced? A laugh burst out of her before she could stop it. What is this 1820? Do people still do that? My mother does, Greg said, dragging a hand down his face. And Jasmine couldn't help but notice the slight tremor in his fingers, a telltale sign of genuine stress. She seems to believe that because I inherited my father's corporation, I now require a wife from an appropriate family to complete the public picture. And you're not on board with that? I'm not on board with my mother picking out my wife like she's shopping for a new handbag. Jasmine sized him up. Underneath the designer clothes and the aura of wealth, his frustration felt raw and real. All right, she finally said with a sigh. You can hide back here until they're gone for good. But if you so much as touch anything, I will fillet you just like this catfish. Are we square? Greg asked, a grin breaking across his face that transformed him from merely handsome to dangerously charming. Crystal. Jasmine felt a jolt in her chest, a sudden unwelcome flutter she refused to analyze. For the next 20 minutes, Greg remained tucked away behind her prep table as she methodically readied her stall for the day. His gaze was locked on her, but not on the scarred tissue that usually captivated people's attention. Instead, he studied her hands, her face, as if he were trying to assemble a puzzle with missing pieces. How long have you been at this? He asked, his eyes tracking the meticulous way she arranged fillets on the ice. 3 years, she answered, her tone clipped. She was trying her best to ignore him. But it was impossible when his quiet presence felt like a low-grade fever making the air around her feel thick and warm. You're a natural with that knife, he remarked. She gave a non-committal shrug. I ought to be. I use it all day, every day. No, Greg countered, shaking his head. I mean, you're genuinely skilled. Like you've had professional training. The angle, the pressure you apply, that's not something you learn just by repetition. For a fraction of a second, Jasmine's hand stilled. A flicker of something alien sparked in her mind. A flash of sterile lights, the sharp smell of antiseptic, a different kind of polished blade in hands that were hers, yet not. A voice echoed from nowhere, steady hand, steady heart. A lance of pain shot through her temple, sharp and blinding. Hey, you okay? Greg's voice cut through the fog, laced with concern. I'm fine, Jasmine bit out, shaking her head to clear the strange vision. Just a headache. It was the lie she always used. The truth about her amnesia was a secret she guarded with everything she had. 3 years ago, she had woken up on the side of a road, a stranger to herself and the world. Her only possessions were a catastrophic head injury, a scar that had sealed her left eye for good, and a total void where her past should have been. The only anchor she had was the piece of advice a kind stranger offered before leaving her at a bus depot. You're from the fishing village. You sell fish. Against all logic, the words had settled in her soul as truth. Handling the fish felt instinctive. It was as if her body held memories her mind had lost the key to. Does it still hurt? Greg asked softly. Jasmine's hand instinctively flew to the raised scar on her face. Not anymore, she murmured. It just looks monstrous, I guess. It doesn't look monstrous, Greg said, his voice gentle. It looks like you survived something terrible. Jasmine's breath hitched in her throat. No one had ever described it that way before, not as a mark of pity, but as a badge of resilience. All clear, Big Joe yelled from his vegetable stall across the market path. Those suits of yours just took off like a bat out of hell. Greg stood brushing the dust from his jeans. Thank you. I mean it. I owe you. You don't owe me a thing, Jasmine replied, fighting to keep her voice even as he stepped into her personal space. But maybe try not to lead your mother's security detail to a person's place of business next time. Greg pulled out his wallet. At least let me buy something. What's your recommendation? Catfish is the freshest, hauled in this morning. He nodded, pretending the powerful fishy odor wasn't making him queasy. He knew he had to buy something. I'll take 2. Jasmine wrapped a pair of perfect catfish fillets in butcher paper. That'll be $15. Greg held out a solid black credit card. Jasmine had only ever heard rumors about cards like this. The kind whispered about in stories of the ultra-rich, the ones with no credit limit. She stared at the impossible piece of plastic in her hand, then up at Greg's easy smile and back down again. You know what? She said, pressing the card back into his palm. First time customer gets a special. On the house, she said. He immediately started to argue, I can't possibly let you do that. I insist. Jasmine's tone was final, leaving no room for debate. You were in a bind. I got you out of it. Consider us even. As she said it, something in his gaze flickered, changing completely. It was as if he was truly seeing her for the very first time, not as the woman slinging fish who'd just given him cover, but as someone else, someone remarkable. What's your name? He asked, his voice softer now. Jasmine, she replied. Jasmine Carter. Well, Jasmine Carter, Greg said, his fingers closing around the wrapped fish as he purposefully left a sleek black card on the wet counter. I don't think you understand. You may have just saved my entire week. He started to leave, took a few steps, then paused and pivoted back to face her. Can I ask you something personal? Greg ventured. Go ahead. His gaze drifted upward. That scar. How long have you had it? About 3 years, she answered cautiously. Why do you ask? Greg fell silent for a beat, his eyes scanning her features as if searching for an answer. And before this life, what were you doing before you ended up selling fish? A cold knot formed in Jasmine's stomach, and the air suddenly felt thick in her throat. Because it wasn't it. The one question she could never ever answer. The question that shadowed every waking moment of her life. The word caught in her throat. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with an unintentional, sharp defensiveness. I don't know. Greg's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You don't know? I don't remember, she clarified. Jasmine's voice was devoid of emotion. 3 years ago, I came to on the shoulder of some highway with this. Her finger traced the faint silvery line that bisected her eyebrow. And not a single memory of who I was before that moment. So no, I have no idea what I used to do. I have no idea where I was born. I can't even be sure Jasmine Carter is my real name. The only thing I know for certain is that I sell fish. That is the sum total of my existence. The confession spilled out far more bitter and raw than she'd intended. His simple question had torn open a wound that never truly healed. Seeing her pain, Greg's entire expression transformed, his features softening with empathy. I'm so sorry, he started. I never meant to. It's fine, Jasmine snapped, turning her back on him and focusing intently on the ice in front of her. You need to leave, now, before those guys your mother sent decide to circle back. He paused. It's Greg Daniels, by the way. Greg lingered for a second longer, the unspoken words hanging in the air between them, but Jasmine refused to face him again. At last, the sound of his receding footsteps echoed on the wet concrete. She reached for the black card he had abandoned, its cool, heavy plastic feeling strangely significant in her palm. And she fought to suppress the hollow ache blooming in her chest, a strange grief, as if she'd just parted ways with someone she was supposed to know. If you're already caught up in this mystery, if you have to know the secret behind their connection, and if you need to find out who Jasmine was before that scar changed everything, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget to ring that notification bell. And because the next chapter of this story is going to change everything. When the market finally shut down at 2 p.m., Jasmine was still staring at that black card. The smart thing to do would be to cut it into pieces and throw it away. She should erase Greg Daniels and his probing questions from her mind completely. And above all, she needed to forget the unsettling feeling of a forgotten memory that his presence stirred within her. But forgetting was a luxury she couldn't afford. The Carter family was being crushed under a mountain of debt. Her adoptive father, Thomas, was still recovering from a heart surgery the year before an operation the insurance company had barely touched. They were still chipping away at a staggering $300,000 in medical bills. Her adoptive mother, Louise, was pulling exhausting double shifts down at the diner, working through the constant grinding pain in her worn-out knees. Her younger brother, DeAndre, had sacrificed his shot at college to take a grueling job at a local warehouse. And in her hand, she held the answer, a card that promised no limits. One single swipe. That's all it would take to wipe the slate clean, to give them all a fresh start. But it would also make her the thief. And the Carters, the only family she'd ever known, hadn't raised her to be one. No. She would find a way to return it. She would do the right thing, model. Her eyes traced the elegant script pressed into the heavy cardstock. It was an address in another universe. Daniels Corporation, a downtown skyscraper she'd only ever heard whispered about, a world away from her small fishing town. What kind of desperation drove a man like that so far from his world just to escape his own mother. Got that storm brewing behind your eyes again? Big Joe's voice rumbled as he leaned against her stall, a knowing grin on his face. It's the same look you get right before you pull off something brilliant or do something spectacularly foolish. The jury's still out, on which Jasmine confessed, prompting a deep, hearty laugh from the big man. Listen to me, kid. In all my years, I've learned one thing: the best stories always start with a bad decision. That absurd piece of wisdom was the only push she needed. Her mind was made up. An hour later, there she was standing at the foot of the Daniels Corporation Tower. It was a monument of shimmering glass and cold steel that tore a hole in the sky. The people gliding through its doors were flawless, like they'd stepped directly off the pages of a luxury magazine. Impeccable suits, bags with names she couldn't pronounce, and shoes that cost more than her monthly earnings. Her gaze dropped to her own reflection in the polished glass. Denim shorts where a few stubborn fish scales still clung like glitter despite her scrubbing. A faded t-shirt advertising her family's fish fry. Battered sneakers. And the scar. It was always the scar. She felt their gazes catching it, a tiny involuntary snag as they passed. Then the quick aversion, the flash of pity, of discomfort, or just morbid curiosity in their eyes. She was hardened to it, but that didn't stop the familiar sting. You can do this, she whispered to herself. Walk in, return the card, act like you belong, get out. Taking a breath, she pushed through the revolving doors and into a space so vast and silent, it felt like a church. Marble floors gleamed, dark wood paneled the walls, and water danced in a colossal fountain at its heart. The ceiling had to be at least 30 feet high, a vaulted expanse of white. It felt less like a building and more like another world. May I help you? The voice was crisp, belonging to the receptionist. She was a woman sculpted from ice with flawless makeup and a smile that was purely decorative. Her eyes did a slow, dismissive scan of Jasmine, a silent appraisal that clearly concluded she was lost cleaning staff. That clinical gaze paused for just a fraction of a second too long on the scar that cut across Jasmine's cheek. Hi, yes, Jasmine said, forcing her feet toward the massive desk, her voice steadier than her nerves. I have something to return to Greg Daniels. He left this at my market stall this morning. One of the receptionist's perfectly arched eyebrows lifted a fraction. And do you have an appointment? No, I just wanted to make sure he got his card back. Mr. Daniels doesn't accept unscheduled visitors. The woman cut in, her voice smooth as polished stone. You can leave it with me. I will ensure it reaches him. It was the condescending finality in her tone, the unspoken message that someone like Jasmine wasn't worthy of his time. That made a knot of defiance tighten in her chest. Actually, Jasmine replied, her voice dropping to a cool level pitch. He was very specific. This was to be a personal delivery. So I'll be delivering it to him. Personally. I'm afraid that isn't... Is there an issue here? The new voice, calm and authoritative, sliced through the tension. A tall, slender man in a suit that cost a fortune had materialized beside the desk. His eyes were sharp, missing nothing, and they were fixed on Jasmine with an expression of open curiosity. Mr. Kenneth, the receptionist exhaled, a wave of relief washing over her face. This young woman was just insisting. I know who she is. Kenneth stated, his words cutting the receptionist off completely. He then turned his full attention to Jasmine, a hint of a smile touching his lips. You're the seafood vendor from the West Side Market. You're the one who assisted Mr. Daniels earlier today. Jasmine could only blink in stunned silence. How could you possibly? Mr. Daniels called me directly from the market, Kenneth explained calmly. He asked me to find out about the remarkable woman who helped him evade his mother's rather enthusiastic security team. He delivered the line with such perfect deadpan gravity that Jasmine had to fight back a laugh. The receptionist's professional mask slipped, her jaw slackening. He ran a background check on you. A hot flush of indignation crawled up Jasmine's neck. Unnecessary precaution, Kenneth interjected with practiced calm. Mr. Daniels is waiting, right this way. Her mind spun as they crossed the marble lobby. He had actually looked into her life. What could he possibly have learned? And why on earth was he anticipating her arrival? Look, I'm only here to give this back, Jasmine insisted, her voice tight. I'm not looking for a problem. Miss Carter, Kenneth began, his tone softening as the elevator doors slid shut. I've been in Mr. Daniels' employ for 7 years. During my tenure, I've observed him with countless individuals, and from heads of state and screen icons to titans of industry. And in all that time, I have never witnessed him observe someone with the same intensity he had while watching you on that market security feed. What is that supposed to mean? Kenneth offered a small, knowing smile. It means that my employer is an exceptionally discerning man, and he believes he's just discovered something truly unique. And what would that be? A person entirely unfazed by his wealth, and someone who ignited a feeling in him he didn't even realize he'd been missing for the last 3 years. Before Jasmine could even begin to process that cryptic statement, the doors whispered open, revealing not a hallway, but an immense penthouse office, walled in glass, offering a breathtaking panorama of the Atlanta skyline. There, silhouetted against the cityscape, stood a figure with his hands tucked into his pockets. It was Greg Daniels. He'd changed from his earlier attire into a charcoal suit so exquisitely tailored it could only be bespoke. His hair was sharp, freshly styled. He was the very picture of a corporate titan, a man who owned the view before him. Yet the moment he turned and his eyes found Jasmine, that powerful facade melted away, replaced by the same unguarded, brilliant smile she remembered from the market. And the feeling returned. That inexplicable magnetism, a bizarre sense of familiarity that defied all logic. Jasmine Carter. He breathed her name as if it were a fragile treasure. "I can't believe you're here." "You forgot this," Jasmine managed, lifting the credit card. Her voice was barely a whisper, far softer than she'd wanted. "Figured you'd be missing it. I left it for you deliberately." "For what reason?" "Because I had to know if you would bring it back," Greg answered, plainly closing the distance between them. "Most people wouldn't have." "Well, I'm not most people." "No?" Greg affirmed, his gaze locked on hers pointedly, refusing to drift to the scar on her cheek the way nearly everyone else's did. He took in her entire face as if every feature held equal and profound significance. "You are absolutely nothing like them." From the doorway, Kenneth cleared his throat. "I will give you both some privacy. Mr. Daniels, your 4 o'clock appointment has been moved." Once Kenneth had retreated, a weighted silence filled the space between them. "I owe you an apology," Greg said, breaking it. "Back at the market, for prying about your past. It was completely out of line." "It's fine," Jasmine interjected quickly. "People are curious. I'm accustomed to it. But you shouldn't have to be." There was a sincerity in his tone, a gentle regret, that chipped away at the wall she kept around herself. "Why did you have me investigated?" she asked, her voice softer now. Greg moved to his expansive desk and retrieved a thin manila folder. "Because nothing about our meeting felt ordinary. You offered help to a complete stranger. You turned down a reward, and you brought back a credit card that anyone else would have already drained. The moment I saw you, I felt—" He cut himself off, shaking his head as if to clear it. "You're going to think I'm insane." "Go on, I dare you. My life started 3 years ago with total amnesia. Insane is just another Tuesday for me." She held the retort on her tongue, her gaze fixed on his. What could possibly sound so insane? The words tumbled out of her, a little too keen, a little too desperate. Greg's gaze locked with hers. "It was like I recognized you, as if I'd spent my whole life searching for someone I didn't even know existed." A sharp intake of breath was Jasmine's only reply. That impossible feeling. She'd felt it too. The confession settled between them, heavy and electric. "And that's precisely why—" Greg began, his words measured as he opened the folder on the table. "I have a proposition for you, one that is going to seem utterly unbelievable. More unbelievable than a family trying to arrange a marriage in 2024. A faint smile touched Greg's lips. "Far more unbelievable than that." He paused, steeling himself. "Jasmine Carter," he said, his voice deadly serious. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The question was so absurd, Jasmine couldn't help but laugh, a true, unrestrained sound of disbelief. "Okay, you have to be kidding me. I have never been more serious in my life." The laughter caught in her throat, turning to ash. You're asking me to marry you." "I am. A man I literally just met hours ago." "That's correct." "What is this, some kind of love at first sight fantasy?" The sarcasm dripped from her words, but the sincerity in his eyes stole her breath. "Perhaps," he murmured, his voice low, "or perhaps it's something that runs much deeper. For now, however, what I'm putting on the table is a business proposal. A 6-month marital contract. Your compensation will be $500,000 per month." The room started to spin around Jasmine. "That's $500,000 every month, and I'll also clear your family's entire debt down to the last cent." "But why me? Greg shut the folder with a soft thud. As he closed it, she saw fragments of her life inside. Pictures of her at the market, a dossier on the Carter family. "Because you are the perfect candidate," Greg stated simply. "You have integrity, a relentless work ethic, and your need for financial security is as urgent as my need to escape my mother's matchmaking. This is a transaction that serves both of our interests. A marriage in name only, legally binding for 6 months but entirely platonic." Afterwards, we file for divorce, and you leave with $5 million free and clear. Her mind reeled. This wasn't just insane, it was the definition of madness. But then an image of Mama Louise flashed in her mind, forcing herself through extra shifts on knees that screamed in protest every single night. She saw Dad Thomas, his retirement, a distant dream because every last dollar was essential for their survival. She pictured DeAndre, his quiet sobs echoing in his bedroom when he thought no one was listening. The sound of a soul surrendering its dreams. How much time do I have to think about this? The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. You have until 8 p.m. this evening, Greg replied. I require your answer by that time. Tomorrow evening, my mother is throwing a charity gala, and she has taken the liberty of inviting 3 women she deems suitable wife material. Imagine her face if I arrive with you on my arm as my wife. That's the entire point. Jasmine moved to the floor-to-ceiling window, her gaze lost in the sprawling lights of Atlanta below. Can I ask you a question? She murmured, her back still to him. Ask me anything. When your eyes land on me, what is it you see, the scar or the woman behind it? She could hear his footsteps approaching. He stopped just behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body a breath away from touching. I see a warrior who endured something unimaginable and came out the other side. Greg's voice was a low murmur. And for reasons I can't begin to fathom, I also see the one person who makes my heart race. That scar. It's a chapter of your life, certainly. But it isn't the entire book. And I can promise you it is not what I noticed first. Jasmine finally turned, finding him standing nearer than she'd realized. So near she could count the flecks of gold swimming in the brown of his eyes. So near the invisible current between them felt undeniable. Then what do you see? She breathed. Home, Greg answered without hesitation. When I look at you, I see home. And I have absolutely no idea why. Without thinking, Jasmine's hand lifted, drawn to his face as if by some unseen force. The second her fingertips brushed against his skin, a powerful jolt shot through them both. A blinding flash seared her mind, a frantic voice echoing in the darkness. Stay with me, please stay with me. Images flooded her senses, hands stained with blood, the insistent rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. I'm right here, the voice swore. I won't leave you. And then as quickly as it came, it was gone. Jasmine snatched her hand back, her body trembling. What was that? Greg stared back at his own face, pale with shock. I have no idea, he breathed. They remained frozen for a moment, chest heaving, caught in the grip of a connection that neither could begin to understand. Marry me, Greg repeated, his voice raw. This time it wasn't a business proposition. It was a desperate plea. Even if it's not real, even if it's only for 6 months. Marry me, he implored, and maybe we can finally understand why it feels like we've known each other our entire lives. Jasmine staggered back, trying to clear her head. I need some time, she managed to say. You have until 8 p.m. tonight. Jasmine could only nod numbly as she walked towards the elevator. But just before the doors could slide shut, she turned back to him. Greg. Yeah, he answered. What's your favorite food? Greg blinked, thrown by the sheer randomness of the question, and then a slow smile touched his lips. My grandmother's peach cobbler, he said. Why, I just wanted to know one real thing about you. Jasmine replied, her voice soft. Before I make my decision. As the elevator doors began to close, he called out, What's yours? I don't know. Jasmine's voice drifted back through the closing gap. I can't remember. And for some inexplicable reason, as the doors sealed him from her view, both of them were smiling. That evening, Jasmine sat at the worn kitchen table in the Carter family's cozy but cramped apartment in East Atlanta. Mama Louise was at the stove, the comforting sizzle of fried chicken filling the air, a luxury she insisted on. She always maintained that the hardest times were precisely when a good meal was needed most. Dad Thomas was in his usual chair, absorbed in the evening paper, his reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose, as they always were. DeAndre was focused on his laptop at the far end of the table, studying for an online course he took after his grueling warehouse shifts. This was her sanctuary. This was her family. They were her entire world. And yet she couldn't escape the image of Greg's intense gaze. He hadn't looked at her like a stranger, but like a half-forgotten dream he was desperate to recall. You're a million miles away tonight, baby girl. Mama Louise commented, her voice rich with concern. She set a plate piled high with food in front of Jasmine. Is something weighing on you? Jasmine looked at the 3 people who 3 years ago had discovered her dazed and alone on the shoulder of the highway. They had rushed her to the hospital, draining their life savings to cover her medical care without a moment's hesitation. And when she woke up with no memory, not even of her own name, they opened their home and their hearts naming her Jasmine and loving her unconditionally. They had made her part of their family, and now an opportunity had appeared to repay their incredible kindness. Mama, Jasmine started, her voice barely above a whisper. What would you do if I told you I could wipe out all our debts, Dad's medical expenses, DeAndre's college savings, every single penny? The cheerful hum of the kitchen abruptly ceased. Even the chicken seemed to stop sizzling. Mama Louise's hand paused in midair, a serving spoon hovering over a plate. Dad Thomas slowly lowered his newspaper. DeAndre looked up from his screen. Jasmine, Mama Louise said carefully, what are you getting at? If you're considering some shady loan or getting into trouble, it's not a loan, Jasmine interrupted firmly. It's more like a job. What kind of job on earth pays enough to clear $300,000 in debt? Dad Thomas pressed his voice edged with skepticism and worry. Jasmine inhaled deeply, her heart pounding. The kind of job where I have to get married. The room went completely still. Married. Mama Louise finally whispered, her eyes wide. To whom? A man I met today, Jasmine confessed. His name is Greg Daniels. This man isn't just rich, he's on another level. And he's offering me a deal. A marriage of convenience. It's not forever, just 6 months. In exchange, he's offering enough money to solve all our problems. DeAndre broke the stunned silence. Jasmine, come on. You have to see this as some kind of setup. Guys with that kind of money don't just pluck strangers out of a crowd and propose. It's a con. It's not a con. Jasmine shot back, her voice tight. I just met him today at the market. He's legitimate. His business is legitimate. The offer is too, but a wedding, sweetheart. Mama Louise sank into her chair, the weight of the words settling in the room. That's a holy bond, not some game you play for a payday. It wouldn't be a real marriage, Mama. It's a contract, nothing more than a business deal on paper. The marriage is a marriage, her dad. Thomas stated, his voice low and steady. Whether you sign a contract or not, the law will see you as his wife. That carries a weight you can't just brush aside. Look, I get how insane this sounds. Jasmine conceded, her gaze sweeping over her family. I really do. But just imagine what this could do for us. Dad, you could finally retire, working 2 jobs. Your heart can't handle that strain forever. And Mama, you could leave that diner job that's wrecking your knees for good. DeAndre could finally go to college, the future he's earned, the one he's always dreamed of. And you, my love. Mama Louise's voice was soft. Beyond the money, what is in this for you? Jasmine paused, the fight draining from her face. Answers, she whispered. Maybe. Answers to what? Her dad's brow furrowed in confusion. Her hand drifted to the faint scar by her eye, a gesture she didn't even notice. When I see him, there's this flicker of recognition, like we've met somewhere a long time ago. I just thought, if I spent time with him, it might jog my memory. Help me remember who I was before the accident. Tears welled in Mama Louise's eyes. Oh, my sweet girl. Just then, Jasmine's phone vibrated against the table, a message from a number she didn't recognize. Hello, it's Greg. Any thoughts on my proposal? No pressure, of course. All right, perhaps a little pressure. My mother has rung me 17 times in the last hour. Against all odds, a small smile touched Jasmine's lips. I have to give him my decision tonight, Jasmine announced. Her father methodically folded his newspaper, setting it aside. Then let me give you my answer, he said, his eyes locking on hers. And I want you to hear every word. We raised you, we loved you as our very own, not so we could stand by and watch you auction yourself off to the highest bidder. It doesn't matter how tight money gets. We will find a way to handle the debt. We always have. But Dad, let me finish, he interrupted, raising a hand. However, we also can't live your life for you. You're an adult. If you truly believe this man is trustworthy, and if you feel deep down that this could unlock the past for you, then you'll have our support. But you have to be absolutely certain. You have to walk into this with your eyes wide open. Jasmine's gaze fell to her phone, to the text from Greg Daniels, the man who could erase every one of their worries with a simple signature. She remembered the look in his eyes when he saw her. He hadn't stared at her scar or offered empty pity. It was something else. Something that felt like he already knew her, like a long-lost piece of home. With a steadying breath, she lifted the phone and began to type. I'll do it, but I have conditions. The reply was almost instantaneous. Name them. She cleared her throat. First, we're honest with my family. They have to know this is just an arrangement. Agreed. Second, separate rooms. This is a financial transaction, nothing more. Agreed, my guest rooms are quite comfortable. Third, if I decide I'm done at any time, I walk away. No arguments, no questions. This time the pause stretched on for a few seconds. Agreed, though I hope it never comes to that. Jasmine's heart did a little flip. Her fingers flew. Fourth, you answer one question for me right now with total honesty. Ask away. Today at the market, well, when you looked at me, did you recognize me? Like we had met somewhere before. The three dots materialized, vanished, and then appeared again. Finally. Yes, and it's been haunting me all day. I have no idea what it signifies, but I need to figure it out with you. Jasmine scanned the words on her screen for the third time as if they might change. Finally, she replied, fine, I'll be your wife. His response was instant, perfect. The courthouse tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. Kenneth will have a car pick you up. I can just take the bus. You're about to be my wife. Even if this is just an act, you are not taking a bus to our wedding. She shot back a reply without a moment's thought. Especially if it's an act. I'm taking the bus. You're a fighter. You don't even know it yet. That's good. I need a fighter. I'll see you tomorrow. Mrs. Daniels? The screen of her phone glowed, but Jasmine wasn't seeing it. Her gaze lifted to the faces around the table. The only family she'd ever known, the people who had taken her in and loved her for 3 solid years. I have to do this, she finally breathed out. Without a word, Mama Louise reached over her warm hands enveloping Jasmine's. Then you won't be taking a single step alone, baby girl. We're right behind you. Even if this plan is completely insane, especially because it's insane, DeAndre added, a wide grin spreading across his face. Honestly, this is the most excitement we've had around here since the dog ate the Thanksgiving turkey. Dad Thomas just offered a quiet, steady smile. I just need one promise from you, Jasmine. What is it? This whole thing, it feels like a dream built on sand. The second you feel it starting to crumble, the very instant you have a single doubt. You get out of there. Don't hesitate. Do you promise me? I promise, Dad. Later, tucked into her narrow bed, Jasmine traced the familiar cracks in the ceiling with her eyes. In the morning, she was getting married to a practical stranger. By nightfall, she would step into a life of impossible wealth, a reality she'd only ever glimpsed on a screen. And somewhere in the dark, forgotten corners of her own mind, in the vast emptiness where her memories were supposed to be, a flicker of something ancient stirred. That jolt when her fingers had grazed his skin, that overwhelming sense of familiarity. What was it trying to tell her? The Fulton County Courthouse was the absolute antithesis of a wedding chapel. There were no flowers, no soaring music, no joyful guests tossing rice, just the hum of fluorescent lights, the squeal of linoleum underfoot, and the sharp, sterile scent of bleach that clung to the air. And yet the moment Jasmine pushed through the heavy doors and saw Greg waiting for her, immaculate in a perfectly cut navy suit, her heart gave a violent lurch that had absolutely nothing to do with their contract. He spun around at the sound of her approaching steps. The smile that lit up his features was so unguarded, so intensely warm, that Jasmine had to mentally grab hold of the truth. None of this was real. You're here, Greg breathed, the relief in his voice palpable. I told you I would be. You still could have walked away. Breaking a promise isn't in my nature. Jasmine closed the distance between them. She had chosen a simple white sundress, not for the sake of tradition, but because it was the most beautiful garment she possessed. No, Greg murmured, his gaze sweeping over her, drinking in every detail of her face. He saw the scar that marked her temple, the unwavering focus in her single eye, and the iron resolve in the set of her jaw. That's definitely not who you are. An electric silence stretched between them, a moment where they just saw each other. This is completely insane, you realize that, Jasmine finally said. Beyond insane, Greg agreed instantly. We met yesterday. Barely 24 hours ago, I was hiding from killers behind your fish cart. And now we're about to be married. Contractually married, Greg corrected, his voice dropping. Unless what? He just shook his head slightly. Nothing, let's just see what happens. As if on cue, Kenneth materialized at their side holding a clipboard. It's all set. The judge is ready for you. The entire ceremony was over in exactly 8 minutes. A world-weary judge recited the words from a page, her voice a monotone drone that suggested she'd performed this ritual thousands of times before. Greg slid a simple, cool band of platinum onto Jasmine's finger. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was heavy, beautiful in its timeless simplicity. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to get one for you. Jasmine admitted, a flush of embarrassment creeping up her neck. It doesn't matter, Greg said, and the sincerity in his eyes was so profound she almost believed him. By the authority granted to me by the great state of Georgia, the judge droned on, I declare you husband and wife. You can kiss the bride now. Jasmine's eyes met Greg's in a silent panic. We really don't have to, she began to whisper. But he was already closing the distance. Just for practice, he murmured, his voice low, in case my mother is watching. His lips met hers, a touch so soft, so gentle and questioning, and then her entire world fractured. A sharp gasp escaped her against his mouth as another image detonated behind her eyes, brighter and more violent than the last. The sudden image of a hospital room. A much younger Greg, unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. Her own hands, no, they weren't hers. They were pressing into his side, guiding a scalpel. And a voice that wasn't hers whispered, I'm right here. Don't you worry. I won't leave you. Greg flinched back, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the look in her eyes. Are you all right? I think. But before she could grasp the memory, Kenneth's polite cough sliced through the tension. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Daniels. Your car is ready outside. Stepping out of the courthouse and into the blinding glare of the Atlanta sun, Jasmine stared at the unfamiliar weight of the ring on her finger. Well, she murmured, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. I guess that makes me a married woman. That makes you my wife. Greg corrected his tone, leaving no room for argument. He captured her hand, the one now bearing his ring, and laced his fingers through hers. So how does it feel? Terrifying. Like I just leaped into an abyss. Well, Mrs. Daniels, Greg's voice was low, and that infuriating smile of his sent a shockwave through her. You're in luck. I'm an expert at catching people who fall. And against all reason, against the sham marriage, the cold business deal. Every logical part of her screaming, this was a mistake. Jasmine found herself smiling back. We'll just have to see about that, Mr. Daniels. What is that memory Jasmine is fighting? How do these two really know each other? I want to see your theories. Flood the comments section right now. And if you're not a part of this story yet, you are about to be left behind. You need to hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications and tell every friend you have who lives for romance. Because the gala tonight is a powder keg, and the fuse has just been lit. Okay, let's talk about tonight, Greg said, navigating the car back toward his penthouse. The gala, she confirmed, where I have to charm your entire family and play the part of the adoring wife. That's the one. Greg stopped for a red light, his entire focus shifting to her. My mother is going to be there. My grandfather, too. And my cousin Brandon, who is just waiting for me to implode so he can snatch the company from under me. Every single one of them will be dissecting our every move, searching for a single flaw. Any hint that this perfect marriage is a lie. Oh. Jasmine let that sink in. So what's the plan? Greg reached across the console, his fingers closing around her hand. The contact was like a live wire against her skin. We give them a masterpiece, a portrait of a couple so madly in love they can't bear to be apart. I'm a terrible actress. Then don't act, Greg murmured. Just let me lead. Jasmine. Yeah. So tonight, when I touch you, when my arm is around your waist, or I pull you in close, remember it's all part of the performance. It's for them. It's not real, understand? But the intensity in his gaze, the way it burned like she was the only thing holding him steady in the world, told Jasmine he was trying to convince himself more than her. Understood, she whispered back. A performance. Just a performance, Greg echoed, and the lie hung in the air between them, heavy and fragile. When Kenneth arrived at the Carter apartment precisely at 5 o'clock in the evening, he wasn't alone. He'd brought an army, stylists, makeup artists, and what appeared to be an entire high-end boutique on wheels. Mr. Daniels insisted you be provided with a suitable range of options. Let me break it down, Kenneth announced as his crew orchestrated a stunning metamorphosis, turning the Carters' modest living room into a high-fashion runway. Mama Louise's eyes widened in disbelief. Saints preserve us, baby girl. What in heaven's name have you gotten yourself into, boss? Honestly, Mama, I'm still trying to piece that together myself. 2 hours later, a woman Jasmine barely knew stared back at her from the full-length mirror. The gown was a masterpiece of deep emerald green, its elegant simplicity a stark contrast to the chaos. It clung to her form before spilling to the floor in a cascade of gentle fluid waves. Her hair was a masterpiece of soft curls swept up and artfully arranged to cascade around her face, not to hide the scar, but to frame it. The makeup artist had gently offered, almost in a whisper, if she'd like to conceal it. Jasmine's refusal had been immediate and firm. If Greg could see a story of survival in that mark, not damage, then maybe it was time she did too. Damn, sis. DeAndre's voice was pure awe. That dress looks like it's fighting to be worthy of you. Jasmine added her voice low and sure, like the person wearing it commands any room she enters. No, Mama Louise corrected, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Like a queen, my girl, a queen. A faint smile touched Kenneth's lips. Mrs. Daniels, are you ready? The name echoed in her mind. Mrs. Daniels. That's who she was now. As I'll ever be, Jasmine murmured the words, feeling foreign. The ride to the gala was a blur of smeared city lights. Kenneth's voice was a low drone in her ear, a strategic brief of names, alliances, and conversational landmines. Jasmine heard none of it. Her own thoughts were a chaotic storm. What if I stumble? What if his family despises me on sight? What if this entire charade of a marriage is so transparent they see right through us? And that kiss, what if it meant something more? Something she was terrifyingly unprepared to face. We've arrived, Kenneth announced, his voice slicing through her panic as the car glided to a halt before the Grand Hyatt Buckhead. A crimson carpet stretched from the curb to the massive doors, flanked on both sides by a wall of photographers, their lenses like 100 hungry eyes. Wait! Jasmine choked out her breath, catching in her throat. Why in the world are there photographers? Because Kenneth replied with unnerving calm, the impromptu wedding of Greg Daniels is the biggest society scandal to hit Atlanta in years. Ready, he asked? No, she thought. Not in a million years. But she gave a tight, jerky nod all the same. The door swung open and Kenneth extended a steadying hand. Jasmine drew a shuddering breath, clinging to Mama Louise's voice in her memory. You hold your head up high, baby girl. We are Carters, and Carters bowed no one. With that fire in her veins, she stepped into the storm. The world erupted in a blinding barrage of camera flashes as shouted questions flew at her like bullets. Who is she? How did you two meet? Is it true? A wedding this morning. What happened to your face? That final question struck with the force of a physical blow. Her hand shot up to cover the scar, a reflex she had never quite unlearned. And then he was there. Greg, in absolute vision in a tailored black tuxedo, moved through the pack of reporters as if they were nothing but smoke. He reached her in an instant, his eyes locking on hers, saying nothing at all. His fingers gently wrapped around her wrist, drawing her hand away from her scar. Don't hide, he murmured, his voice a low vibration meant only for her. All of you is beautiful. Then he turned to face the wolves, his arms sliding around her waist in a gesture of pure, unapologetic possession. Ladies, gentlemen, allow me to introduce my wife, Jasmine. That is the only statement you will receive from us tonight. We have an event to attend. He guided her up the carpeted stairs, his hand a warm, solid anchor at the small of her back, a living shield against the flashing lights and the invasive questions. Thank you, Jasmine breathed, the words barely audible. Always, Greg rumbled in reply. And the way he said it felt less like a word and more like a sacred vow. At the top of the stairs, just before they crossed the threshold, Greg stopped her, turning her to face him. You all right? He asked, a surprising flicker of nerves in his own eyes. Me, you do this for a living. Not like this, he confessed, his gaze intense. Not with you, not with someone who makes me feel. He trailed off, shaking his head at a loss for words, like what she prompted softly. His eyes found hers again. Like for the very first time, I am exactly where I am meant to be. Before she could form a reply, the grand doors swung inward, releasing a wave of music and chatter. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest. Ready to face the lions, Greg asked, offering her his arm. Jasmine took it, her fingers gripping his bicep. Let's get this over with. Together they stepped into the den. Instantly a hush fell over the glittering ballroom. Every head turned. Conversations died in mid-sentence. As Jasmine walked into that sudden silence on Greg's arm, her eyes were immediately captured by one figure. A woman in a searing red dress staring back at her as if she had just seen a ghost. The crystal flute tumbled from her grasp, exploding against the marble. A crimson stain bled across the pristine white floor, dark and sudden as a wound. But Jasmine didn't even see the spill. The moment her gaze collided with that woman's, agony erupted behind her eyes, a white-hot spike, vicious and absolute. The world dissolved into a sickening blur, reality itself seeming to buckle and drag her into a half-forgotten nightmare she couldn't name. A face loomed above her, dominated by eyes as dark and cold as a winter night. A cruel slash of a smile that never reached those eyes, a knife gleaming in her hand. You're just a girl from the fishing village, aren't you, dear? A long, long way from home. You sell fish, the voice was a silken threat. That's the only thing you need to remember. The vision shattered, vanishing as quickly as it had materialized, leaving Jasmine's head spinning from the violent whiplash. She gasped for air, her fingers digging into Greg's arm. Jasmine? Greg's voice was laced with alarm. Hey, what is it? Are you all right? But she was deaf to him, her gaze locked on the woman in the crimson dress. In the depths of her mind, a primal instinct was screaming, "Danger, run, she will destroy you." "Jasmine, talk to me." Greg gently turned her to face him, his hands firm on her shoulders. "What's going on?" he pressed. Jasmine breathed, her eyes still fixed across the grand ballroom. "The woman in red, who is she?" Greg followed her line of sight. "That's Dr. Jane Williams. She's my cousin Brandon's fiancée." "Why?" The name echoed in Jasmine's skull. Dr. Jane Williams. Why did that name feel like a shard of glass in her heart, making her want to scream, to weep, to run until her lungs burned? I don't know," Jasmine whispered. "But there's something about her." "Greg, I think I've met her before." The unspoken words hung between them before the amnesia. Greg went rigid. "I'm not sure. Maybe it's just..." Another bolt of pain shot through her temple, cutting her off with a wince. "Every time my eyes land on her, my head feels like it's trying to tear itself apart to find a memory that just isn't there." From across the room, Jane's own stare was fixed on Jasmine, her expression a chaotic mix of raw panic and utter bewilderment. Her knuckles were white, her hands balled into tight fists at her sides. "That's enough," Greg murmured, his arm wrapping firmly around Jasmine's waist. "Let's get you out of here." But as they turned, a voice sharp and cold as steel sliced through the party's murmur. "There you are." A tall, imposing woman in her 60s, draped in a shimmering silver gown, was descending upon them with a glacial expression. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, were locked onto Jasmine with the intensity of a predator that had just found its mark. "Mother," Greg said, his voice flat and carefully controlled, punctual as ever. "Don't you dare take that tone with me, Gregory Daniels." She halted before them, her gaze sweeping over Jasmine in a slow, insulting appraisal from head to toe. "I understand you were married this morning without informing me, without an invitation, and certainly without my blessing. I'm 31 years old, Mother. I don't require your permission. You absolutely do when your actions reflect upon the reputation of this family." Patricia Daniels' eyes narrowed to slits. "And who precisely is this?" "This," Greg stated, pulling Jasmine protectively against his side, "is Jasmine. My wife." "Your wife," Patricia echoed the word as if it were a foreign object in her mouth. Her eyes landed on Jasmine again, lingering this time on the faint scar near her temple. "And where does one find such a wife?" "My security detail informs me you only met yesterday. So don't even think about lying to me." Jasmine felt Greg stiffen beside her, coiling to spring to her defense, but she found her own voice first. "At the fish market," Jasmine answered, her voice ringing clear and steady. "I sell fish." Patricia's perfectly painted mouth fell agape. "You sell fish?" "Yes, ma'am. And I sell the best catfish you'll ever have the pleasure of tasting." Patricia turned to her son, her voice flat. "She married you for your money." "Actually," Jasmine interjected calmly, "your son married me for his freedom. So I suppose in the end, we're both getting exactly what we want." From somewhere in the room, a guest sputtered on their drink. Greg was fighting back a smile. "Mom, now is really not the time or the place." "Oh, this is precisely the time and place." Patricia's voice sliced through the air. "Gregory, I have dedicated years to finding you a proper wife from a respectable family only for you to go and marry a fishmonger you met yesterday." "Technically, it was 2 days ago," Greg corrected. "And yes, because she is honest and she is brave. And she couldn't care less about my fortune or my family name, which is far more than I can say for the parade of women you've pushed on me." Patricia went pale, looking as though she might faint. But before she could utter a word, an older black man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair materialized at her side. He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Patricia, breathe. You're causing a scene." Then he offered Jasmine a genuinely warm smile. "Hello there, young lady. I'm Malcolm Daniels, Greg's grandfather. And despite my daughter's atrocious manners, I am delighted to welcome you into our family." Jasmine felt a knot of tension in her shoulders finally begin to unwind. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Please call me Malcolm." He observed her face with a gentle intensity, and unlike his daughter, his gaze didn't linger on her scar, with that familiar, ugly mix of pity and disgust. It was just pure curiosity. "That's quite the story you carry there, if you don't mind my asking." "Grandpa," Greg warned in a low tone. "It's all right," Jasmine interjected softly. Her fingers unconsciously brushed against the raised skin. "A car accident 3 years ago. I don't have many memories of it. I woke up in a hospital room with nothing but this." A strange, unreadable emotion flickered in Malcolm's eyes. "3 years ago, you say?" "Yes, sir." Malcolm's gaze shot to Greg, his expression inscrutable. 3 years. Grandpa, not now, Greg said under his breath, his eyes darting away. But Jasmine saw the loaded glance, the unspoken weight of that phrase. 3 years ago was not just a date, it was a landmark. Before a question could even form on her lips, a different voice, slick with condescension, cut in. Well, 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 Cousin Greg finally tied the knot. I never thought I'd live to see it. A tall, light-skinned man with a perpetually smug grin sauntered toward them. He had Greg's build, but none of the warmth that radiated from him. This had to be Brandon. And clutching his arm, wearing a blood-red dress and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, was Jane Williams. The pain in Jasmine's head flared violently, but she clamped down on it, refusing to let anyone see her falter. The last thing she could afford was to look weak. Brandon, Greg's voice was pure ice. Jane, how good of you to come and offer your congratulations. Congratulations. Brandon let out a short, sharp laugh. I'm here to lay eyes on the woman who finally shattered your 3-year streak of rejecting every eligible bachelorette in Atlanta. She must be one of a kind. She is, Greg stated, simply, his gaze fixed on Jasmine, as if she'd single-handedly lit up the sky. Jane, however, was staring intently at Jasmine. Her eyes were narrowed as if she were trying to see past a cleverly constructed disguise. Do I know you? Jane's question was sudden, her voice wound tight. Jasmine held her gaze. I don't believe so. I run a fish stall at the West Side Market. Do you shop there often? No, Jane answered slowly. I don't go to places like that, but you seem so familiar. I get that sometimes, Jasmine replied with a breezy confidence she didn't feel. I suppose I just have one of those faces. Perhaps, Jane conceded, though her tone was thick with doubt. Brandon looked back and forth between them, his interest clearly piqued. Jane, are you all right? You look like you've just seen a ghost. I'm fine, Jane snapped far too quickly to be convincing. It's just, the wedding was so abrupt, that's all. You're not the only one who feels that way, Patricia retorted coldly. Gregory the First require a private word with you, now. Whatever business you have with me, Greg stated, his tone unyielding, you can discuss in front of my wife. Fine. Patricia's sharp gaze landed on Jasmine. Did you sign a prenuptial agreement? Mother? Greg's voice was a blade. It's all right, Jasmine intervened softly. She met Patricia's glare without flinching. No, ma'am, I did not. Your son never presented one. But if it eases your mind, I assure you I have no interest in his fortune. The lie tasted more bitter than Jasmine could have imagined, because it was a lie, wasn't it? She was pursuing the payment Greg offered the lifeline for her family. Did that make her a gold digger? This is a disaster for the family's reputation, Patricia declared. With all due respect, Mrs. Daniels, Jasmine countered, her voice low but steady. Shouldn't your son's happiness mean more than public perception? A sudden hush fell over the ballroom as all eyes turned toward them. A slow smile spread across Malcolm's face. I like her. Patricia looked aghast. You like everyone. No, Malcolm corrected gently. I like people with a spine, and this young woman has one made of steel. His eyes found Jasmine's. Young lady, let me tell you a little something. My son-in-law, Gregory's father, was a good man. He married for love, not for a bank account. Picked a girl from rural Georgia everyone whispered wasn't worthy. That girl, he paused, smiling warmly at his daughter, was Patricia. And look how wonderfully that turned out. So don't you let anyone convince you that you don't belong in this family. Do you understand me? Tears pricked at the corners of Jasmine's eyes. Yes, sir. Thank you. Excellent! Malcolm boomed, clapping his hands together. I believe a gala calls for dancing. Gregory, take your wife for a spin. Show this room how stunning you are together. Greg's gaze softened as he looked at Jasmine. May I have this dance, Mrs. Daniels? Jasmine placed her hand in his. You may, Mr. Daniels. Greg guided her onto the floor just as a slow, haunting melody began to play. It was a timeless, romantic piece she'd never heard, yet her soul seemed to recognize it instantly. I am so sorry about my mother, Greg murmured, drawing Jasmine into his embrace. One hand rested on the small of her back, the other intertwined with hers. She can be a force of nature. She despises me, Jasmine stated plainly. She doesn't despise you. She despises her own inability to control me. Greg drew her imperceptibly closer. And your grandfather seems to approve. I suppose that's what truly counts. Does it? Jasmine tilted her head back to meet his eyes. They were impossibly close now. So close she could see the flecks of gold swirling in their brown depths. So close she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her own. Count, I mean, since none of this is real. A heavy silence hung between them for a beat. They moved as one to the music, their bodies swaying in a rhythm that felt practiced and ancient. Jasmine, he finally broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Of course. Does any of this, he hesitated, feel fake to you? Her breath caught in her throat. No. Good. Greg breathed the word, a soft caress. Because it doesn't feel fake to me either, and I'm desperately trying to understand why. As the music swelled around them, Jasmine let her head fall against his chest, the steady thrum of his heart grounding her. This felt more than right. It was a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she was missing. After a while, she spoke his name softly. Greg, you mentioned earlier that it's been 3 years since you've been with anyone. Why 3 years specifically? Did something happen then? The muscles in his back went rigid beneath her hand. His grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. I fell in love. His voice was a low murmur. 7 years back, I was in a wreck. A bad one. I was fading fast, bleeding out on the side of the road. And then this doctor appeared out of nowhere. She was unbelievable. She's the only reason I'm standing here. She performed a miracle in the back of a speeding ambulance. Her voice cutting through the fog, pleading with me to hold on, promising I would make it. Jasmine could feel her own pulse quicken. So what became of her? By the time I came to 2 days later, she was gone. Vanished to the next crisis, the next life to save. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it was steeped in sorrow. It took a while, but I finally found her. She was infuriatingly brilliant and beautiful, the most stubborn person I'd ever known. A surgical resident with an intellect that was off the charts, and she wanted me gone immediately. But why? She was convinced I was just some grateful patient mistaking a life debt for genuine feelings. He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. She couldn't have been more wrong, but she made me earn it. I had to prove that I saw her not just the hero who saved me. And did you? Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. Did you prove it? In the end, yes. It took half a year of ambushing her at the hospital with coffee, inventing medical questions, and engineering chance encounters at her favorite bookstore. The memory softened his voice, warming it from the inside out. Finally, she gave in for one date. That one date turned into a second, and then a third. And somewhere along the way, I fell completely and utterly in love with her. A knot formed in Jasmine's chest. What was her name? The silence that followed stretched on for so long, she thought. He wasn't going to tell her. Then his voice barely audible, he said, Daphne. Daphne Hampton. The 2 words struck Jasmine with the force of a physical impact. An explosion of agony ripped through her skull. She let out a sharp gasp and staggered, but Greg's arms were there instantly to steady her. Jasmine, what is it? What's wrong? Another searing flash of white blinded her, a vision tearing through her thoughts. Or was it something else? A memory. She saw a younger Greg propped up in a hospital bed, a wide, hazy smile on his face as he looked at her. Has anyone ever told you you're beautiful? His voice was slurred but charming, and he tried to wink. You have a concussion. You're not making any sense. Oh, I'm making perfect sense, Dr. Hampton. My name is Daphne, and you need to sleep. Only if you'll be here when I open my eyes again. A smile bloomed on her face, her smile. I promise. The vision shattered, throwing Jasmine violently back into the present. Dr. Hampton, she breathed, her hand instinctively covering the scarred ruin of her eye as a fresh spike of pain shot through her head. Daphne Hampton. Greg went completely still. What did you just say? I have no idea why that came out of my mouth. She trailed off, looking up at him, her good eye filled with a storm of confusion. Greg, she pleaded. What happened to her, to Daphne? All the color drained from his face. There was another accident. 3 years ago. She was driving with her parents coming home from a medical conference. Something went wrong with the car. The brakes gave out. They went off the road. Her parents died on impact. And Daphne, his voice cracked with grief, she was ejected from the vehicle. They searched everywhere, but her body was never recovered. The authorities believe she was swept away by the river. After searching for weeks, they declared her legally dead. Jasmine finished for him, her voice a hollow whisper. Yes. His hands trembled where they gripped her arms. How could you possibly know that? I didn't know. It fit. But her mind was a whirlwind, pieces flying together at impossible speeds. Greg told me the exact date of the accident. 3 years ago, August 15th. A chill of absolute dread washed over Jasmine, freezing the blood in her veins. It was August 15th, 3 years ago, the day my life began in a hospital bed. Greg's eyes widened in disbelief. What are you talking about? They found me on the side of a road, she explained, her voice distant, near the Chattahoochee River. I'd suffered a traumatic brain injury. I had no identification, no memories, nothing but this. She traced the scar above her eye, and the look on Greg's face was one of pure shock, as if he was staring at a ghost. The music, the crowd, it all faded away. They were frozen in the center of the dance floor, staring at each other as an impossible truth began to dawn on them. Greg. Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. Tell me, what did Daphne look like? Slowly, reverently, Greg raised his hands to frame her face. His touch was feather light as his thumb ghosted over the scar above her left eye. Her eyes, he breathed, were the most stunning shade of brown I'd ever seen. Both of them. And her smile, it could illuminate the darkest room. She was about 5'6", a brilliant mind in the most capable hands. And she had this little birthmark right here. His finger drifted down, tracing a delicate spot on Jasmine's left shoulder, and Jasmine's breath hitched in her throat. She had one in that exact spot. Greg, I have to ask you, but he cut her off, his voice tight with urgency. And I need the absolute truth. Have you had any flashes? Glimpses of a life before the accident? Yes, she confessed, the word barely audible. They've been stronger since I met you, that kiss at the courthouse. When we touch it feels like I'm remembering you, like I'd known you my whole life. What do you see in these flashes, he pressed. A hospital room. You're in the bed, you look younger, and someone is there. It feels like me, but it's not. I don't understand. She's holding your hand, Jasmine's voice trembled. Greg, am I losing my mind? No, he said, his voice a pillar of strength. You're remembering. Remembering what us, he whispered. I knew it. This feeling, it's been screaming at me. You're not Jasmine, you're... But before the name could leave his lips, a scream tore through the ballroom, shattering the moment. Help! Somebody please help! He's not breathing. They spun around, the spell between them broken, their attention snapping toward the source of the chaos. Malcolm Daniels was sprawled on the floor, and a frantic Patricia knelt over him, her screams piercing the air. A panicked crowd was already forming a tight circle. Call 911. Patricia shrieked, he's choking, as someone in the crowd yelled, is there a doctor here? Dr. Jane Williams forced her way through the onlookers, her face ashen, but her expression resolute. I'm a doctor. Give me some room. She knelt beside Malcolm's prone form, quickly getting into position behind him. She wrapped her arms around his midsection, preparing to deliver abdominal thrusts to his limp body. Stop! Jasmine's voice sliced through the panic with chilling authority. You're going to kill him. Every head turned. Jane looked up, her eyes wide with shock and fury. Excuse me. I am a board-certified surgeon. I know he's unconscious. But Jasmine was already moving, carving a path through the stunned crowd, pure instinct driving her forward. You can't perform the Heimlich on someone who's unconscious. You'll fracture his ribs or puncture a lung. I know what I'm doing, Jane retorted, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her confidence. She was clearly terrified. Without a second's hesitation, Jasmine pushed her aside and took her place beside Malcolm. Her fingers immediately found the carotid artery on his neck, searching for a pulse. It's thready, she announced, her voice a sudden, startling island of calm in the sea of panic. It's a cardiac event complicated by a total airway obstruction. He's crashing. How could you possibly know that? Patricia sobbed. You work at a fish market. But Jasmine paid her no mind, her hands already a blur of efficient practice motion. She ripped Malcolm's tie loose, then tilted his head back, peering into his airway. It's a complete blockage, Jasmine confirmed. There's food lodged deep in his trachea. Abdominal thrusts are contraindicated when the patient is unresponsive. You'd force the contents into his lungs and cause massive internal damage. Sheer terror was etched across Jane's face. It was the clinical terminology, the cold, precise logic. It was the exact way Daphne used to speak. So what are we supposed to do? Brandon's voice cracked with panic. He's dying. I need to perform an emergency cricothyrotomy. Jasmine announced, her fingers already flying across Malcolm's neck, locating the precise landmarks purely by feel. You're going to slice his throat open, Patricia shrieked. If I don't, he'll suffer irreversible brain damage in 2 minutes, Jasmine stated, her voice chillingly calm. I need an empty pen barrel now. Jane struggled to her feet, protesting. You can't do that. You're not qualified. You're going to kill him. At that, Jasmine's head snapped up. Her one good eye drilled into Jane, a look so fierce it forced the other woman to take an involuntary step back. Sit down, Jasmine commanded, her voice as cold as a morgue slab. Your clumsy attempt at the Heimlich nearly collapsed his lung. If you really want to be useful, then get out of my way. Greg was already there, thrusting a pen into Jasmine's outstretched hand. Just do it, Greg pleaded. What if she's wrong? Patricia sobbed. She's not, Greg stated with unwavering certainty, his gaze fixed on Jasmine. I trust her. Now save him. With a practiced efficiency that was terrifying to watch, Jasmine disassembled the pen. Her fingers, deft and certain, located the cricothyroid membrane by feel alone just beneath the Adam's apple. Jane was frozen in place, a spectator to the impossible. She watched as Jasmine executed a small, precise, horizontal cut. The technique was flawless, the angle perfect, the depth meticulously controlled. That wasn't a guess. That was muscle memory, the kind of skill you only get from doing this again and again. A choked gasp came from Malcolm. Air flooded his lungs through the newly created passage. A wave of stunned whispers swept through the room. Jasmine maintained steady pressure, keeping the airway clear. Someone call 911. Inform them we have a 72-year-old male cardiac event with an obstructed airway. I performed an emergency cricothyrotomy. He's stabilized and breathing, but he requires immediate transport for surgical airway management. Her tone was completely level, utterly professional. She was using clinical terminology that no fishmonger should ever know. How did you possibly, Patricia began. Now! Jasmine barked, and three people instantly fumbled for their phones. Patricia could only stare, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jasmine, where on earth did you learn to do that? I don't know, Jasmine whispered, her gaze falling to her own hands, which were slick with blood, but they were perfectly still. Not a single tremor, as if they had performed this exact procedure 100 times before. I just knew. Jane began backing away, her face a mask of pale horror, her own hands shaking uncontrollably, because she had just witnessed a ghost perform battlefield surgery. And in that moment, she absolutely knew that Daphne Hampton had just clawed her way back from the grave. You? Jasmine said, her voice low, as she continued to kneel by Malcolm, her fingers never leaving his throat. Dr. Williams, you're a surgeon, aren't you? Jane could only manage a mute, terrified nod. Then tell me why you didn't know that the Heimlich maneuver is contraindicated on an unconscious patient. Jasmine's voice was a quiet, deadly blade. That's something they teach you in your first year of medical school. Jane's mouth opened and snapped shut. Not a sound escaped. She practically fled the ballroom. But just as Jasmine started to say something else, the paramedics stormed in, and the room dissolved into the controlled chaos of saving a man's life. But from across the grand room, concealed in the shadows by an exit, Dr. Jane Williams watched it all unfold with pure murder in her eyes. Because Daphne Hampton was supposed to be dead, or at the very least a brain-dead shell in a hospital bed. And if she was starting to remember everything, if she remembered what Jane had done to her, then Jane's entire world was about to be reduced to ash. The only sound in the hospital waiting room was the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. Greg sat slumped over his head, buried in his hands. Patricia wore a path in the linoleum, the sharp click of her heels echoing in the silence. Brandon was lost in his phone while Jane sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on Jasmine with the predatory focus of a snake. Jasmine couldn't take her eyes off her own hands. They were clean now, but in her mind she could still see Malcolm's blood coating them, could still feel the phantom sensation of her fingers moving with an unnerving absolute certainty. There had been no hesitation, not a flicker of doubt. Her movements were certain, practiced, as if this were a procedure she had done 1,000 times. Jasmine, Greg said softly, touching her arm, you just saved his life. I know, Jasmine breathed, her voice trembling. But Greg, I have no idea how. I sell fish for a living. How could I have known how to do that? Because you're more than a fish vendor, Greg insisted, his gaze boring into hers, searching her face. Jasmine, I believe you have a connection to Malcolm Daniels' family. The tension shattered when a doctor appeared in the doorway. Everyone shot to their feet. I'm his daughter, Patricia said, rushing to him. How is he? He's stable, the doctor replied with a calming smile. Whoever performed that field cricothyrotomy is the reason he's alive. Had he been deprived of oxygen for another 2 minutes, we'd be having a profoundly different conversation. The doctor's eyes scanned the room. Which one of you is the paramedic? I'm not a paramedic, Jasmine said, her voice barely audible. I only helped. The doctor's eyebrows climbed his forehead. Ma'am, what you did was far more than just helping. That procedure requires years of intensive medical training. Where did you complete your residency? I never did, Jasmine answered. I sell fish. You sell fish, the doctor echoed, bewildered. He glanced at Greg. Is she being serious? It's a long story, Greg replied. Well, long story or not, you have an extraordinary wife, Mr. Daniels. In fact, Malcolm is asking to see her. He wants to personally thank the woman who rescued him. Engulfed by the hospital bed, a tangle of wires and tubes snaking from him, Malcolm seemed incredibly frail, but his eyes were sharp and clear, and they locked on Jasmine the second she stepped into the room. There she is, my savior. He said, his voice a raw whisper from the intubation. Come closer, child. Jasmine hesitated before slowly approaching the bed as Greg remained by the door to give them privacy. I'm just so relieved that you're going to be okay, Jasmine murmured. And I have you to thank for that. Malcolm's hand found hers, his grip surprisingly firm. That was astonishingly clear thinking. Where in the world did you learn to do that? I honestly have no idea, Jasmine confessed. It was as if my hands knew what to do all by themselves. Malcolm's eyes scrutinized her face, taking in every detail. Are you absolutely certain you recall nothing from before 3 years ago? Nothing at all, sir. Malcolm paused, his expression thoughtful. It was 3 years ago that Daphne was pronounced dead. The very same day you woke up without a past. Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, sir. Would you mind if I asked a rather personal question? Not at all. Do you know what your blood type is? The query caught her by surprise. A B negative. They told me at the hospital when I woke up that it was extremely rare. Malcolm's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Daphne was also AB negative. Less than 1% of the world's population has it. That's just a coincidence. And the surgical method you used, Malcolm pressed on. I may be old, but I am far from blind. That was an advanced, highly skilled technique. The sort of skill that one only acquires after years of dedicated training. Daphne was a surgical resident. She was considered one of the most promising. Jasmine's hands began to tremble. Mr. Daniels, Malcolm, please. I'm not telling you these things to distress you, child. I am telling you because I believe you have the right to know the truth. He tightened his grip on her hand. I think there is a very real possibility that you are Daphne Hampton. I think the woman my grandson was supposed to spend his life with, the woman we buried, is standing right here in front of me. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. But he didn't even recognize me. Jasmine's voice was a ghost of a whisper. If I were really her, if I was the woman he claimed to love, wouldn't he have felt it the instant he saw me? Perhaps, Malcolm said, his tone incredibly soft. Or perhaps that scar altered your face just enough that his mind simply refuses to see the truth. Think about it. He spent so long searching for a ghost that he might not be able to see the living, breathing woman standing right in front of him. A sad smile touched Malcolm's lips. Or maybe in a part of his heart, he's too afraid to look. He already knows it's you. How else could you explain the intense pull he feels toward you? Why else would he ask a complete stranger to marry him? Jasmine's gaze drifted toward Greg. She knew from this distance he couldn't possibly make out their words. He was watching them from the doorway, his face a mask she couldn't decipher, but his eyes held a distant, hazy quality. It was the look of a man caught between wonder shock and utter disbelief. I have to know, Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling. I have to know if it's me, if I'm really Daphne. Then that's what we'll do, Malcolm declared, his tone absolute. We'll run every test we can, DNA if necessary. We will find the truth for you, child. That's a promise. An unnerving quiet had settled over the hospital waiting room by the time Daphne and Greg emerged from Malcolm's room. Patricia Daniels was hunched over in a chair, her typically flawless posture gone. A faint tremor ran through her hands as she clutched a coffee cup she hadn't touched. Mrs. Daniels, Daphne began gently, Malcolm is going to be all right. The doctor told me. I'm aware of what the doctor said, Patricia cut in. Yet her voice lacked its usual sharpness. It was laced with weariness, as if she'd been defeated. They also made it very clear that if you hadn't done what you did right when you did, my father would be gone. The statement hung in the air, and Daphne had no response. Patricia finally lifted her head, her eyes locking with Daphne's. She was truly seeing her for the first time, not the scar, not with judgment, but with something that felt dangerously close to respect. You saved his life, Patricia stated, her voice low. Using advanced medical techniques, you swear you don't possess skills that take a lifetime to learn. You acted instantly, without a trace of fear, as if you had done it 1,000 times. And Dr. P. Williams, a board-certified surgeon, was about to make things catastrophically worse. Patricia pressed on. You stopped her. You immediately knew what was wrong and the precise way to fix it. Greg reached for Daphne's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. The motion didn't go unnoticed by Patricia. She saw the way her son looked at this woman as if she was the only one who existed. "I need to apologize to you," Patricia said. The words seemed to physically pain her. "I judged you from the moment I saw you. I saw a scar on a fish vendor and immediately assumed you were a gold digger. I never actually saw you." "Mrs. Daniels." "No, let me say this." Patricia held up her hand. "My son looks at you the way his father used to look at me before all the money before the corporation. Back when we were just a couple of kids in rural Georgia with absolutely nothing but each other." Her voice broke. "I had forgotten what that even looked like. Something real, not the calculated unions I've been trying to force on him." Daphne felt the sting of tears in her eyes. "I don't have a clue who you are," Patricia went on, "and I can't imagine what your story is, but you saved my father and my son loves you. For those two things, you have my gratitude." "You're welcome," Daphne replied softly. The drive to Greg's penthouse that evening was thick with silence. "The guest room's down that way," Greg said quietly, pointing down a hall. "The master is in the other direction. Bathroom, kitchen, everything is at your disposal. Try to get comfortable." As he turned to go, Jasmine caught his arm. "Greg, we have to discuss this." "Discuss what?" "The possibility that I could be Daphne Hampton. What that would change." Greg's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say to that, Jasmine?" "I want you to be honest with me," Jasmine pleaded, her voice fracturing. "Back at the market when you saw me, did some part of you know? Did you recognize me at all?" "I don't know." Greg dragged his hands down his weary face. "I don't know what to believe. All right, the moment I looked at you, I felt something. A connection. Like you were important. But it's impossible. Daphne is gone. She's been gone for 3 years. I mourned for her. I buried a coffin that was completely empty because they never found a body. I've spent 3 years trying to piece my life back together after losing the only person I've ever loved. So no. When I saw a fishmonger with one eye at the West Side Market, my first thought wasn't, oh look, it's my dead girlfriend." The words were cruel, but beneath them, Jasmine could hear the shattering of his heart. "But what about now?" she pressed, stepping closer. "Now that you know the timeline is a perfect match. Now that you've watched me perform surgery with your own 2 eyes." Greg's gaze locked on her, truly seeing her. "Now I have no idea what to think. Because if you actually are Daphne, that means I wasted 3 years of my life grieving for you while you were alive this entire time. It means you were lost and terrified with no memory of me, and I wasn't there to find you. It means I failed you in the worst possible way. And if you're not Daphne," Greg went on, his voice cracking with emotion, "then I'm falling for someone who is just a painful reminder of her. And that makes me the most despicable kind of person imaginable. Because you deserve a man who wants you for who you are not, because you might be a ghost from his past." Jasmine closed the space between them. So close, he could feel her breath on his skin. "And what if I am her? What if I am Daphne?" Greg's eyes burned into hers. "Then I need to know why you never came back. Why you didn't even try to find me. Why you let me believe you were dead all this time. Because I didn't remember." Jasmine's voice tore through the room. "I didn't remember you or my own life. I didn't remember anything at all. I woke up and someone told me I sold fish in a seaside village, and that's the only reality I've ever known." "Who told you that?" Greg's question was sharp as a blade. "Who found you? I don't know. I never saw their face clearly. There was just a voice. A woman's, I think." Jasmine squeezed her eyes shut desperately, trying to pull the memory from the fog. She just kept repeating that I was from a fishing village, that I was a fish seller. Then she just left me at a bus stop and disappeared. Greg's entire frame went rigid, a statue of ice. "A woman?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "What did she sound like? I can't remember clearly. Everything was so hazy. My head was pounding. I think I was confused and in so much pain. She could have told me I was a princess from another planet, and I would have accepted it as fact." "Jasmine." Greg gripped her shoulders, his touch gentle but firm. "This is critical. Did you recognize her voice at all? Would you know it if you heard it again? I might." "I'm not." Jasmine stopped, her gaze snapping up to his. "Why are you saying you think this was done to me on purpose? That this was no accident?" "I'm saying," Greg said, each word deliberate and cold, "that the brake lines on Daphne's car had been cut. The official police investigation was for a suspected homicide. They just never identified a suspect." The world tilted on its axis. "Someone tried to murder me," Jasmine whispered in horror. "If you are Daphne," Greg clarified gently, "which is something we still can't prove." "Then we have to prove it," Jasmine declared, her voice ringing with newfound resolve. "Tomorrow morning, first thing, whatever test, whatever it takes, I need to know who I am." Greg nodded slowly. I'll have Kenneth arrange everything for the morning. He started to leave, then paused and turned back to her. Jasmine, yes. Whether you're Daphne or not, I'm just so glad you're alive. No matter who you are, I want to know what you think is coming. Drop your theories below. And if this story has its hooks in you, if you are on the edge of your seat for Greg and Jasmine, then you need to share this. Make sure you're subscribed because everything is about to be revealed. And believe me when I tell you the truth will change everything. Sleep was impossible for Jasmine. She was adrift in a guest room so vast it could swallow the Carters' whole living room, her eyes fixed on the ceiling above. The moment she dared to close her eyes, images would ignite behind her eyelids. They were ghosts of another life, not memories. The sterile amphitheater of a medical school, the snap of surgical gloves on her hands. A younger Greg, his head thrown back in laughter at something she just said. And a woman's face, dark piercing eyes and a smile that never reached them. Friends don't destroy each other's careers, Daphne. Jasmine shot up in bed, a gasp tearing from her throat. Jane. It was Dr. Jane Williams, the woman in that stunning red dress, the one who had stared at her as if she were a specter from the grave. Jasmine snatched her phone from the nightstand. Her fingers trembled as she typed into the search bar, Dr. Jane Williams, surgeon, Atlanta. A flood of results washed over the screen, professional articles, society photos, and then a headline dated 4 years ago. Medical board launches investigation into near-fatal surgical error. With a sickening lurch in her stomach, Jasmine tapped the link. Dr. Jane Williams, a promising surgical resident at Piedmont Hospital, is the subject of a formal investigation after a routine procedure almost led to a patient's death. Sources close to the investigation state. The critical error was reported by a fellow resident, Dr. Daphne Hampton. The article continued, but the words blurred. Jasmine couldn't read anymore. Daphne Hampton reported Jane Williams. That single act had nearly obliterated Jane's career, costing her everything. 4 years ago, just 1 year before the crash that had supposedly claimed Daphne's life. Oh my God. Jasmine whispered, the sound swallowed by the room. She threw back the covers, her bare feet hitting the cold floor as she sprinted down the hall to Greg's room. She didn't bother knocking, just slammed the door open. Greg was instantly awake, sitting upright, his instincts on high alert. Jasmine, what is it? What's wrong? Jane. Jasmine heaved, struggling for breath. It was Jane. She's the one who... But the thought shattered, obliterated by another memory crashing down on her with brutal force. 3 years ago, the back seat of her parents' car. The sound of her own laughter, light and carefree. I am just so proud of you, sweetheart. Her father's voice beaming. Dad, please stop. You're going to make my head swell. Oh, let him brag. Her mother's warm laugh. My baby girl, the award-winning surgeon. And then the world fell away, the high-pitched scream of failing brakes, the raw terror etched on her father's face, the violent, sickening symphony of twisting metal and breaking bone. Waking at the bottom of a ravine, the world a smear of pain. Blood slicked her skin, confusion fogged her mind, and then Jane's face appeared above her. Jane, thank God. You have to help me. Please. You stole my entire life from me, Daphne. My career, my name, everything. What are you, Jane? What are you doing with that? With that knife? I'm ending this. I'm ending you. A blinding pain as her head struck a rock. The world dissolving into a gray, humming haze. Waking up again a complete blank. Not even her own name. Who? Who are you? And Jane's expression shifted, the rage replaced by cold, sharp calculation. I'm your friend. You're from the fishing village, darling. You sell fish. That is all you ever need to remember. A scream tore through Jasmine, raw and full of a stranger's agony. Greg was there in an instant, catching her as her legs gave out, and she collapsed into him. Jasmine, talk to me. What is it? I remember, she sobbed, clutching him. Greg, I remember everything. She tried to kill me. Jane left me for dead. My parents. Oh God, my parents. Your parents? Greg cupped her face, his touch gentle. Jasmine, whose parents are you talking about? Jasmine looked up, her vision blurred by tears streaming from her one good eye. Mine, she choked out. Richard and Diane Hampton, they were in the car with me. They didn't survive. And Jane, she found me down there in the wreckage, and she tried to finish what the accident started. But when I hit my head again and couldn't remember anything, she saw her chance. She cooked up a new life for me instead. She turned me into someone else. She made me forget. You. The color drained from Greg's face. You're Daphne. I'm Daphne, Jasmine confirmed, her voice cracking. I'm her. I'm the woman you fell in love with. I'm... The words caught in her throat. I am so, so sorry that I forgot you. He crushed her against his chest, an embrace so fierce it stole the air from her lungs. And she welcomed it because, wrapped in his arms for the first time in 3 long years, the world finally felt steady. You're here, Greg breathed into her hair, his voice fractured with disbelief. You're really here, nothing else matters. I don't give a damn that your memory is gone. I don't care about anything but the fact that you're standing right in front of me. I forgot you, Daphne choked out through a storm of tears. I forgot everything about us. But it's coming back now, Greg murmured, easing his grip just enough to see her face. You found your way back to me, and I swear I am never letting you out of my sight again. Ever. Greg, wait, there's more, Daphne said, her voice dropping with urgency. The crash. It was no accident. If Jane was on that road, she's the one who severed the brake line. She took my parents' lives, she left me for dead. And all this time she's been walking free, about to marry into your family, acting as if she didn't utterly shatter my world. A chilling stillness came over Greg's face. Something cold and lethal settled in his eyes. Then we'll make her answer for every last thing she's done. How can we? We start by proving to the world exactly who you are. Then we unleash the truth of what she did. And then we will ensure that Jane Williams is never in a position to harm another soul for the rest of her life. Daphne gave a sharp nod, swiping at her tear-streaked face. All right, where do we even begin? Greg was already reaching for his phone. Our first call is to Kenneth. Our second is going to be a long overdue conversation with the police. And then, Greg cradled her jaw, his thumb tracing the faint line of her scar. After that, we get to discover who we are now, because you're starting to remember the life of Daphne Hampton. But for the last 3 years, you've lived and breathed as Jasmine Carter, and I've lost my heart to both. Daphne's next breath hitched in her throat. Greg, I love Daphne, he said with a raw softness. But Jasmine is the woman I am falling in love with right now. And now that you're complete again, I'm not losing you. He leaned in, and his kiss was a tender, gentle vow full of unspoken promises. And for the first time since she'd woken up with no name, Daphne Hampton finally knew what it felt like to be home. The DNA lab was tucked away inside an unremarkable medical complex in Midtown. Kenneth, with his typical seamless competence, had handled all the arrangements. The comparison is being run against biological samples from Daphne Hampton's old personnel file, Kenneth clarified while a lab tech gently swabbed the inside of Daphne's cheek. The hospital maintained her blood panels from her residency. We expect a preliminary match within 4 hours. We'll have absolute confirmation by morning. And when it comes back as a match, Daphne asked, her eyes fixed on the technician who was carefully sealing the vial containing her sample. Then we possess irrefutable scientific leverage, Kenneth stated. The foundation we need to build a criminal case against Jane Williams for attempted murder. Later, the two of them just sat in Greg's car in the sterile quiet of the parking garage. The engine was off, the silence between them heavy. Your heart racing as fast as mine, Greg asked softly. It's about to beat out of my chest, she confessed. What if this is all a mistake? What if it's some cruel twist of fate and I really am just Jasmine Carter, the fishmonger from the coast, who just happens to know surgical procedures and has these bizarre flashes of someone else's life? Then you are still the incredible woman I asked to be my wife. Greg said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. The woman I'm giving my heart to, that part never changes. And if I'm really her, if the test says I'm Daphne, Greg was silent for a long moment. Then it means I've been given a second chance with the woman I thought I'd lost forever. And I don't intend to squander it. Daphne turned to truly look at him. You honestly mean that, don't you? It doesn't matter to you which name is mine. I care about you, Greg corrected gently. Whoever you are, whatever name you choose. You could wake up tomorrow, decide you want to be called Betty, and go right back to the fish market. And it wouldn't change a thing. I would still choose you. Against all odds, a laugh escaped Daphne. Betty, it was just the first thing that popped into my head. Greg admitted, a grin spreading across his face. Look, what I'm trying to say is, I didn't fall for a name on a driver's license or some ghost from the past. I'm in love with you. The woman right here next to me in this car. The one who can save a life 1 minute and sell fish the next. The one who stands up to my mother and makes me laugh until I can't breathe. You're the one I want. Overwhelmed, Daphne reached across the console, her kiss a soft, sweet testament to her gratitude. Thank you, she breathed, her lips still brushing against his. For what? For seeing me not the person I was, or the person I might become. Just the me of right now. Always, Greg vowed. As he guided the car away from the sterile facility, Daphne asked, "So where are we headed?" "Someplace special," he replied. "A place I hope might unlock something for you." Their destination was Piedmont Park. In the gentle afternoon light, the park was a vibrant tapestry of life. Runners pounding the trails, families spread out on picnic blankets, and dogs leaping for frisbees. Sunlight streamed through the canopies of ancient oak trees, dappling the winding paths with intricate mosaics of light and shade. "This was our place," Greg said softly as they strolled, his hand enveloping hers. "Every Sunday morning without fail. It was our ritual." "Tell me more," Daphne urged, her voice quiet. His voice grew distant with recollection. "You'd pull these brutal weeks at the hospital, sometimes working 36-hour shifts straight. You'd be completely drained, surviving on nothing but caffeine and sheer force of will. But Sundays were sacred. We'd always start by grabbing coffee from that little cart over there." He gestured toward a distant coffee stand. "Then we'd walk the whole loop of the park. Sometimes we'd talk the entire time. Other times we'd just walk in silence. But we were always together." Daphne scanned the scenery, desperate for a spark, a flicker of recognition. "What would we talk about?" she asked. A warm smile touched Greg's lips. "Absolutely everything. You would give me the rundown of your latest surgeries, at least the parts you could share, telling me about the lives you pulled back from the brink and the ones that slipped away. Whenever you described a particularly challenging case, you'd get this intense focus in your eyes, like you were piecing together the world's most complex puzzle. It was captivating. And oh, I just whine about endless board meetings and office drama. You always gave me a hard time for being this buttoned-up CEO, especially since I spent my childhood in rural Georgia, hunting squirrels with a slingshot I made myself." Greg let out a laugh. "You used to say that was the most backwoods thing you could possibly imagine." "Well, it is pretty backwoods," Daphne teased back. "Says the woman who spent 3 years slinging fish at a market. That's completely different." "How is it different?" Daphne opened her mouth to retort, but then a smile broke through. "All right, you win. I guess we're both a little bit country." A comfortable quiet settled between them as they continued to walk. After a moment, Greg guided her from the main path toward a solitary bench nestled beneath a sprawling oak. "This was it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Our bench. Our spot. We could sit here for hours. After one of your marathon shifts, you'd just drift off your head on my shoulder. And I would just sit there holding you, watching the world move around us, thinking I was the luckiest man alive." Daphne lowered herself onto the bench. The surface of the wood was polished smooth from years of use. The oak's powerful roots had twisted around the legs of the bench as if claiming it for the earth itself. As her fingers grazed the backrest, a memory didn't just return, it detonated inside her mind. "I see myself younger. Both of my eyes are working, the scar isn't there. Greg, I got the fellowship." "Oh, baby, that's incredible. I never had a single doubt." "It's in Boston. For 2 years, I watched his entire expression just crumble. The pain in his eyes was visceral, but I told him no. He was stunned. 'What, Daphne, you can't. That's your entire dream.' I told him, 'You're my dream. Boston isn't going anywhere. But this, we can't wait.' And then he was kissing me. A kiss that was deep and desperate and overflowing with love. 'God, I love you. I love you so much. I love you too.' Always." Daphne's breath hitching, her hand flying to her chest. The vision was so sharp, so achingly real. It was as if she could still feel his lips pressed against hers. Daphne, Greg's voice cut through sharp with concern. "What is it? Tell me what you saw." "Boston," she breathed. "The fellowship." I turned it down. Greg's eyes widened with shock. "You remember that?" "You were so heartbroken," Daphne murmured, the memory sharpening into perfect focus. "You spent weeks trying to make me change my mind. You couldn't bear the thought of me giving up my dream because of you. You swore you would wait, that we could handle the distance, but I refused." She looked up at him, then tears streaming freely down her face. "I said you were worth it, that we were worth it." "You did," Greg confirmed, his own voice thick and unsteady. "You said that as long as we were together, absolutely nothing else mattered. That you'd rather have 2 years with me than 2 years becoming the nation's top surgeon without me. Was I right?" Daphne pleaded, questioning everything now. "Did I make the right choice?" Greg cradled her face in his hands, his thumb gently brushing her tears away. "You made the choice that felt true to you, and I loved you completely for it. But baby, there's something you need to understand." "What, I would have waited," Greg said, his voice low and fierce. If I had any inkling of what was coming, if I knew I was going to lose you anyway, I would have forced you onto that plane to Boston. I would have waited 2 years, 10 years. I would have waited an eternity if it guaranteed you were safe and happy and becoming the person you were always meant to be. But you didn't lose me, Daphne insisted. I'm right here. I lost 3 years of you. Greg's voice cracked. 3 years when you were alone and terrified and didn't even recognize yourself. 3 years I wasted mourning you when I should have been out there searching for you. If you had been in Boston, you would have been safe. You don't know that for sure, Daphne countered firmly. Greg, you cannot blame yourself for Jane's actions. The accident wasn't your fault. My memory loss wasn't your fault. Jane made her own twisted choices. I know he conceded, but that doesn't stop me from wishing I could have shielded you from it all. You're shielding me now, Daphne whispered. That's what matters. She gently pulled him down to sit next to her on the bench on their bench, and they simply sat wrapped in a world of their own as life bustled on around them. Tell me more, Daphne said softly after a long silence. About us, about the people we were. So Greg began to tell her. He started with their first date. Dinner was at a tiny Ethiopian restaurant she had picked because she'd never tried the food and was dying of curiosity. He spoke of how she had laughed so uncontrollably at his pathetic attempts to eat with the injera bread that she actually snorted wine out of her nose. He reminded her about the time she made him endure a 9-hour-long medical documentary series and how he had conked out 3 hours in, only to wake up to a mustache she'd drawn on him with a surgical marker. He talked about their traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, Tuesday night tacos, and the way she would shamelessly steal his hoodies, declaring them her property. He described the ways she would hum when she cooked, always perfectly out of tune, and how it was his favorite sound in the entire world. I want to remember all of it, Daphne said, her voice filled with a desperate longing. It's not just flashes, it's everything, Greg assured her, his voice steady. It's all coming back. Every day another piece returns. But what if all the pieces never come back? What if parts of the woman I was are just erased? Then we'll make new ones, Greg replied with unwavering certainty. We'll write new chapters over the blank pages. Better ones. Chapters where you never disappeared, where 3 years weren't stolen from us. Chapters where we get to bicker about whose turn it is to take out the garbage when we're old and gray. A wet, shaky laugh escaped her, yet it was real. That's a little on the nose for romance. Just taking out the trash. What can I say? I'm a knight in shining armor, Greg replied with a wry smile. They sat in a comfortable silence as the sun began its descent, bleeding across the sky in violent strokes of orange and pink. For the first time in ages, Daphne felt a calm settling over her. It was a fragile peace, and it was shattered by the harsh buzz of Greg's phone. Greg, it's Kenneth. The preliminary results just came in. It's a 100% match. Jasmine Carter is Daphne Hampton. Genetically, they are the exact same person. Greg's eyes locked onto Daphne's. It's confirmed. You're Daphne. She let out a ragged breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Some hidden part of her had known all along. But hearing the words spoken aloud made it devastatingly real. So I am her, she whispered, the words barely audible. That's who I am. How are you feeling? Greg asked, his voice gentle. I don't know, Daphne confessed. Relieved that I'm not crazy. Terrified of what this all means. It's everything at once. She looked down at her own hands, the ones that had saved Malcolm. The same hands that had gutted fish every day for 3 years. The hands that once upon a time performed miracles with a scalpel. It feels like I'm meeting a stranger who has been living inside my body. Does that sound insane? It makes perfect sense, Greg said softly. So what's our next move? Now Kenneth's voice crackled from the speakerphone. We use this confirmation to our advantage. We can finally go to the authorities with your testimony about what Jane did to you. No, the word was sharp, absolute. Not yet. Daphne, wait a second, Greg began. Just think about, Daphne cut him off. If we go to them now, what proof do we actually have? It's my word against hers. A celebrated surgeon being accused of attempted murder by an amnesiac based on fragmented memories. Any decent defense attorney would absolutely crucify me on the stand. Damn it, she's right, Kenneth admitted, his voice tight with frustration. A case built on recovered memories alone is a house of cards. We need something concrete. The Hampton estate, Daphne said, her eyes suddenly alight with fierce clarity. Jane is living there, isn't she? Playing lady of the manor and managing my affairs. According to our intel, she has complete control. Yes, Kenneth confirmed. Then that's where the proof will be, Daphne declared. Financials, private documents. Something sloppy. something that links her to tampering with my car's brakes. She might have even kept something from the night she tried to kill me. What are you planning? Greg asked, leaning forward. I need to go home, Daphne said. It's still my house legally, as Daphne Hampton. Technically, yes, Kenneth interjected. But Jane is the acting executor of the estate. They were on the verge of having you declared legally dead. But I'm not dead, Daphne said, her voice like ice. I am very much alive, which means I have every right to walk through my own front door. I'm going with you, Greg, said, no room for argument in his tone. Not right away, Daphne countered. First, we need the key. The vault. The vault. Greg's brow furrowed in thought. Malcolm mentioned that at the hospital. The Hampton family vault, she explained. It's impenetrable. Biometric access, only fingerprints, retinal scan, voice recognition. Nobody can open it but me. What's inside? Kenneth asked. My family's entire history. My parents' last will and testament, property deeds. Financial records that span generations, Daphne said, a predatory gleam in her eyes. And I suspect definitive proof of Jane's embezzlement. If she's been in charge of my estate, I can guarantee she's been lining her own pockets. So you're not just going for the evidence, Greg realized, his eyes widening. You're using the vault as bait. You'll announce you're going to open it. Jane will lose her mind, Daphne said with a cold, sharp smile. We'll force her hand and she'll make a mistake. She'll either make a move to stop me or she'll scramble to erase her tracks. No matter what she does, she's going to make a mistake and we'll be there to catch her. Greg finished. A heavy silence filled the room before Kenneth finally spoke. It's an incredible risk. Jane already came after me once, Daphne said, her voice like ice. She's going to do it again whether we force her hand or not. This way, at least, we control the time and place. All right, Kenneth conceded. I'll put together a press release. Daphne Hampton, presumed dead, has been discovered alive and will be accessing the family vault to reclaim her inheritance. We'll leak it tomorrow afternoon, staged from the Hampton estate. Do it, Daphne commanded. If you're invested in this, if you are dying to see Jane finally pay for what she's done, you need to drop a comment this second. Share this with anyone who appreciates a story of righteous revenge. And hit subscribe because what's about to unfold is pure chaos. Now back to the story. The press release dropped at 8 p.m. By 8:30, it was a firestorm on social media. By 9, it was the lead story on every major news broadcast in Atlanta. Daphne Hampton, the heiress, thought dead for 3 years, has returned to open the family vault. And miles away in her sleek, minimalist apartment, Jane Williams saw the breaking news alert and felt her perfectly constructed world begin to implode. Her phone blared. Brandon, have you seen the news? He practically screamed. It says Daphne Hampton is alive. How is that even possible? I don't know, Jane lied, her voice trembling. This has to be some kind of sick joke, a fraud. It's not a fraud, Brandon cut in sharply. They have a DNA match, and your reaction at the gala, it all makes sense now. It's really her, isn't it? Which means, oh God, Jane, if Daphne's back, what happens to all her assets? You told me you would gain control of the Hampton fortune as soon as the death certificate was issued. And I will, Jane insisted, her voice thin with desperation. Nothing about that has changed. It changes everything, Brandon roared. You've been living in her home, controlling all of her money. The second she walks in and demands an audit, she's going to know. He paused, the horror dawning on him. Oh my God. Jane, what have you done? Nothing, she spat back. I managed the estate, that's all. Everything I did was by the book. You're lying, Brandon stated, his voice flat and cold. I can hear it shaking in your voice. You took her money, didn't you? You've been siphoning funds from a dead woman's inheritance. She wasn't supposed to be alive, Jane shrieked, then quickly lowered her voice to a venomous hiss. She was gone, Brandon. Legally gone. I was just overseeing things until the final settlement. Overseeing? Brandon repeated the word, dripping with contempt. Is that what you're calling it? The silence on the line was deafening. Don't ever call me again. When this whole thing blows up in your face, and believe me it will, I want no part of it. He disconnected. Jane stood frozen, staring at her phone, watching the architecture of her life crumble to dust. Then a new resolve hardened in her eyes. She snatched her car keys and raced toward the Hampton estate. If there was any evidence left, she had to incinerate it. At 10:15 p.m., Kenneth's security chief made the call. Jane just bolted from her apartment building, the team leader said. She's heading northbound toward Buckhead. Looks like she's making a beeline for the Hampton property. Greg and Daphne shared a knowing glance. She's going to burn the evidence, Daphne stated, a grim finality in her tone. We have to beat her there, Greg snapped, yanking his jacket from the hook. The drive to the Hampton estate was a frantic 20 minutes. Kenneth was already on site, flanked by a small team of security personnel. Legally, our hands are tied, Kenneth advised. She has keys and her role as executor grants her access. But we can shadow her every move, document everything. Perfect, Daphne said, her voice laced with ice. Let's find out what secrets she's so frantic to protect. The back door was by some miracle unlocked. They slipped inside, moving like ghosts through the familiar halls, their destination her father's study. A profound silence hung in the air, the darkness thick and suffocating. It was the house of her childhood, yet it felt utterly alien, tainted by a stranger's presence. This way, she breathed, her whisper cutting through the stillness. Each footfall on the polished floorboards triggered a cascade of memories. Her own childhood laughter chasing her down this very corridor, her mother's voice calling for dinner, the warm, booming sound of her father's laugh from behind the study door. They reached their destination. The heavy oak door was ajar. From within came the telltale sounds of a frantic search, the scrape of a drawer, the hurried rustle of papers. Greg moved silently to frame the doorway, a solid presence ready for anything. Kenneth raised his phone, its lens a cold, impartial eye ready to capture whatever was to come. But Daphne only saw the door, the gateway to her father's private world, and took a deep, steadying breath to steel her nerves. Then with a single, decisive push, the door swung inward. "Hello, Jane." The woman froze solid. She was caught red-handed behind the grand mahogany desk, clutching a chaotic armful of files. Her usually immaculate hair was a wreck, her makeup a smear of desperation. The poised, elegant surgeon from the gala was gone, replaced by this cornered thief. She looked like a trapped animal. "Daphne," Jane managed, her voice a thin veneer of composure. "What are you doing here?" "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing," Daphne retorted, advancing into the room. "Last I checked, this was my father's study in my house. And those files? Just organizing," Jane stammered, her voice thin and unconvincing. "The estate is in complete disarray." Daphne glanced at her watch. "Organizing things at 10:30 at night, that's a new level of commitment." Jane's gaze shot to the doorway, now filled by the imposing figures of Greg and Kenneth. Her escape was cut off. "You have no right to be here," she shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "This estate is under my management until I was declared legally dead." Daphne finished for her, her voice dangerously calm. "But there's been a change of plans. I'm not dead, Jane, not even a little bit, which means your tenure here is officially over. And I am intensely curious to see what you've been managing in my absence." Jane's knuckles whitened as she clutched the files. "You can't prove a thing. Can I?" Daphne took another step, closing the distance between them. "I have a strong suspicion that the proof is right there in your hands. Those documents you're so desperately trying to smuggle out of here, they wouldn't happen to be evidence of embezzlement, would they?" "I haven't touched a single cent," Jane spat back. "I have been using my own funds to keep this place afloat. My money," Daphne corrected, her voice dropping to a whisper, "money you had no right to access." "You were dead," Jane screamed, the words tearing from her throat. "You were supposed to stay dead. I saw the car go over. I watched you plunge into that ravine." An absolute deafening silence descended upon the room. The color drained from Jane's face as the horror of what she just confessed washed over her. "You watched me fall." Daphne's voice was barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. "Tell me, Jane, how does one watch something like that? Unless they're standing right there." "No, I meant," Jane sputtered, stumbling backward until her back hit the wall. There was no escape. "You were there," Daphne stated, the pieces of the puzzle crashing together in her mind with sickening clarity. "That night, the night my family was destroyed. You were there. Why, Jane? What possible reason could you have for being at the scene of my family's accident?" The panic in Jane's eyes evaporated, replaced by a chilling, hard resolve. "You brought this on yourself," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "Did you really think I'd ever forgive you for trying to ruin my career?" "So you did it?" Daphne breathed, the accusation hanging in the air. "You sabotaged the car." "I had the brake lines cut," Jane corrected with cold precision. "I only meant to frighten you. Just enough to make you miss that medical board hearing. The one where you were planning to testify against me. But your parents, they were in the car with you." Her voice faded, heavy with the memory. "They were gone. Instantly." "My parents," Daphne whispered, the words shattering. "My mother, my father." "Just to scare me." "It was an accident," Jane screamed back, her voice cracking. "I never wanted them to get hurt. I just needed you to stop destroying my life." I reported you because you almost killed a patient on your table, Daphne roared. Your negligence on the operating table almost cost someone their life. Reporting you wasn't a choice, it was my duty. Your duty was to me, Jane's voice tore through the room. I was your sister, your best friend, and you threw it all away for your damn principles. So you destroyed my family. Then you came for me. Daphne's voice was now a blade of ice. When you found me in that wreckage, you could have called for help. You could have saved me. Instead, you stood over my broken body with a knife ready to finish what the crash started. No, that's not what happened, Jane pleaded, her composure shattering. The amnesia is twisting your thoughts. You can't trust them. My memory is crystal clear, Daphne retorted. I remember staring up at you. I remember begging you, pleading with you to help me. I remember you sneering that I had taken everything from you. And I remember you raising that blade. The next thing I knew, my head was throbbing, and you were feeding me some fabricated story about being a nobody from a fishing village. That's insane. You can't prove a word of it, Jane stammered. Actually, Kenneth interjected, holding his phone up. We've been broadcasting this entire exchange live. That includes your confession to cutting the brake lines and placing yourself at the scene of the crime. The color drained from Jane's face. Daphne advanced towards the desk. And I'm guessing these files you're so desperate to steal will show exactly where you've been funneling my family's fortune for the last 3 years. Records showing exactly where my family's money has been going for the past 3 years. Jane crumpled into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed, the words choked with despair. It was never meant to go this far. None of it was supposed to happen this way. But it did, Daphne said, her voice like stone. And you will answer for it. Kenneth was already dialing the authorities, but Jane wasn't finished. Her hand shot into her purse, emerging with the cold, dark steel of a pistol. No one's going to jail, she announced, her voice chillingly serene, because no one is walking out of this room alive. My only mistake was not finishing the job in that ravine. Jane leveled the barrel directly at Daphne's heart. I won't make that mistake a second time. A flash of fire, the crack of the shot. Greg's roar gun was a split second too late. Kenneth lunged, but Greg was already a blur. He threw his body in front of Daphne, absorbing the full impact of the bullet. The force sent him sprawling, and a scream tore from Daphne's throat as the world warped into slow motion. She watched him collapse, a crimson stain blossoming across his pristine white shirt. Her own voice screaming, and his name sounded distant, like an echo in a nightmare. Then the doctor inside her took control. Instantly, she was on her knees beside him, her palms pressing down hard on the gushing wound. Greg, stay with me. The chaos behind her, Kenneth slamming Jane against a wall, the clatter of the gun, it was all just static. Security guards swarmed the room, their shouts a cacophony that didn't register. The only thing in the universe was the man bleeding out beneath her hands. Kenneth, call 911 now, she commanded, her voice sharp as a scalpel. GSW to the upper left thoracic. It might have punctured a lung. He's conscious. Greg, look at me. Open your eyes. His eyelids fluttered. Daphne, he rasped, don't talk. Save your strength. Her fingers, steady and sure, probed the edges of the entry point. No exit wound. The bullet's still inside. You're going to be okay, she promised, her voice trembling slightly. Do you hear me? You are going to be fine. Bossy. Doctor. A faint pain smile touched his lips. You're damn right I'm bossy. She choked out hot tears, finally breaking free, though her hands remained locked in place. And you are going to do precisely as I say. You're going to stay awake. You're going to keep breathing. And you... Her voice cracked a sob, catching in her throat. You are not going to die on me. You are going to live because I just got my memory of us back and I am not losing you a second time. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. Greg breathed the words barely a whisper. Ambulance is 2 minutes out, Kenneth announced, kneeling over them, having already secured Jane's hands with a zip tie. She was slumped against the wall, consumed by hysterical sobs. 2 minutes is an eternity, Daphne muttered, her focus entirely on Greg. Greg, look at me. Focus. Talk to me about something. Anything. Tell me about our first date. That Ethiopian place, Greg rasped, his voice growing fainter. You laughed so hard, wine shot out your nose. That's right, Daphne coaxed, fighting to keep a smile on her face for him. Keep talking. Stay with me. You laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. Do you remember that? I was mortified, but you told me it was the most adorable thing you'd ever seen. Still is. Greg's eyelids began to flutter shut. No, Daphne commanded, her voice like a whip. Eyes on me, Greg Daniels. You stay right here with me. You gave me your word you would never leave me again. You promised. Not leaving, Greg whispered. Never again. Then prove it, Daphne urged, her voice breaking. Just stay awake. The ambulance is almost here. The piercing wail of sirens suddenly filled the air outside. Paramedics swarmed into the study. Gunshot wound upper left chest, Daphne rattled off her training, kicking in. Her voice was shockingly steady, a stark contrast to the tears streaming down her face. The entry point is approximately 2 inches below the clavicle. I can't find an exit wound. He's conscious, but his breathing is labored. It's likely a tension pneumothorax. He needs a chest tube, now immediate transport, and the OR the second he arrives. The lead paramedic stared at her, stunned. Are you a doctor? Yes, Daphne said. And for the first time in 3 long years, the word didn't taste like ash in her mouth. I'm a surgeon. As they moved Greg onto a stretcher, Daphne moved to get into the ambulance right behind them. Ma'am, only family is allowed. One of the paramedics began to object. I'm his wife, Daphne stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. And I am a trauma surgeon. I am staying with my husband. The paramedic took one look at her hands, slick with blood, her tear-streaked face, and simply nodded. Understood, ma'am. As the ambulance door slammed shut and the siren screamed to life, Daphne gripped Greg's hand, firing off a desperate prayer to any god who might be listening. She'd already lost 3 years with him. She refused to lose him forever. Not tonight, not ever again. The lights of the operating room were a blinding sterile white. Daphne stood on the other side of the glass, still covered in the drying evidence of Greg's wound. She watched the surgical team begin their work, a swarm of blue scrubs moving with practiced urgency. A wave of complete helplessness washed over her as strangers prepared to cut into the man she loved more than life itself. She cursed herself for not knowing where her hospital ID was, just so she could scrub in and make damn sure they did everything right. Mrs. Daniels, Daphne spun around. A nurse she had never seen before was holding out a tablet. I'll need your signature on these surgical consent forms, the nurse explained, softly. The chart lists you as his wife. Is that correct? Yes, Daphne confirmed. I'm his wife. The words spoken aloud made the terror feel suffocatingly real. Her hand trembled so badly she could barely sign her name on the screen. He's in the best hands, the nurse offered, her voice full of kindness. Dr. Chen is the top thoracic surgeon in all of Atlanta. If he can be saved, she's the one who can do it. Daphne could only manage a silent, grateful nod. The moment the nurse was gone, Daphne's gaze snapped back to the figure behind the glass. Don't you dare, Greg, she murmured, her breath fogging the pain. You don't get to ask me to marry you and then just check out. That is not how this is going to work. 3 agonizing hours later, Dr. Chen finally pushed through the OR doors, pulling her surgical mask down with a weary sigh. Daphne was on her feet in a heartbeat. He's alive, Dr. Chen said, cutting the questions short. The bullet missed his heart by 2 inches and tore through the upper lobe of his left lung, but we repaired the damage. He lost a dangerous amount of blood, but he's stable now. He was going to live. Daphne's knees buckled. She collapsed into a chair, her entire body trembling with a wave of relief. Can I see him? She pleaded. He's in recovery now. We'll be moving him to the ICU in about an hour. You can see him once he's settled. Doctor. Chen eased into the seat beside her. You're Daphne Hampton, aren't you? The surgeon who vanished 3 years ago. Daphne simply nodded. I was a resident when you were on staff, Doctor. Chen said, you scrubbed in on my first solo case after I made a terrible mistake. You didn't report me, you just taught me. You showed me what I'd done wrong and patiently guided me on how to fix it. You saved my entire career that day. I don't recall that, Daphne confessed. I wouldn't expect you to. You did it for so many of us. That was just your way. You were kind. A warm smile touched Dr. Chen's lips. I'm so glad you're back, Dr. Hampton. This hospital missed you. I missed you. Long after Dr. Chen had gone, Daphne remained in the waiting room, trying to process the collision of her 2 worlds. She was Dr. Daphne Hampton, a surgeon, a healer, a woman who mended lives and salvaged careers. But she was also Jasmine Carter, a humble fish vendor, a survivor, a woman who had built a new existence from nothing but ash. Could she truly be both? Or would she be forced to choose Daphne? She looked up to see Kenneth, his face etched with exhaustion, but flooded with relief. Greg, he asked, his voice strained. He's going to make it, Daphne said, her voice steady. He's stable. Kenneth let out a shuddering breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Thank God. And Jane, is she in custody? The police have her. They're charging her with attempted murder for shooting Greg. And that's on top of your testimony about the car accident and everything else she did to you. They also recovered the financial files she was trying to steal. It was all there, proof she'd embezzled over $2 million from the Hampton estate over the last 3 years. 2 million. The words made Daphne feel ill. She was desperate, Kenneth explained. She's a gambling addict, a bad one. The debts were real, and she owed some very dangerous people. She used your family's fortune to pay them off. So she murdered my parents. For money, Daphne stated, her voice hollow. And to bury the truth about her medical malpractice, Kenneth added grimly. Daphne squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. My parents would have paid her debts. They would have helped her if she had only asked. They would have gotten her help, she whispered. I know, Kenneth said softly. But Jane never wanted help. She wanted your life, and she was perfectly willing to destroy you to get it. When they finally allowed Daphne into the ICU, she found Greg awake, looking impossibly groggy and pale amidst a tangle of tubes and monitors. But his eyes were open. Hey, he rasped. Hey yourself, Daphne replied, her voice thick with emotion, as she pulled a chair to his bedside. She took his hand gently, careful of the IV line. You scared the hell out of me. My apologies, Greg murmured. It just seemed like the chivalrous thing to do, taking a bullet for my wife. Your fake wife, Daphne corrected automatically. Well, about that, Greg said, I've been thinking. You just got shot. You shouldn't be thinking about anything. You should be resting. Daphne, Greg said, his voice gaining strength. I want to make it real. Make what real? The marriage. Us. He gave her hand a weak squeeze. I know this began as nothing more than a business arrangement. 6 months, $500,000 a month, and then we go our separate ways. But I don't want to go my separate way. I want to stay right here with you. For real. Forever. Daphne felt a sharp sting of tears welling in her eyes. Greg, listen to me. No, you listen, Greg interrupted gently. I fell in love with you twice. Once as Daphne Hampton, the brilliant, beautiful surgeon who saved my life and completely stole my heart. And then again as Jasmine Carter, the stubborn, incredible fishmonger who helped me hide from my mother, who made me laugh, and who showed me what true strength really looks like. And now that I know you're both, I am more in love with you than I ever thought was humanly possible. You are on a heavy dose of pain medication, Daphne said, a broken laugh escaping through her tears. You can't mean that. Greg's voice was strained but certain. Every single word, I want you to be my wife. For real this time. Not as part of a contract, not as a charade for my family, but because I am completely in love with you, all of you. Daphne, Jasmine, and anyone else you choose to be. Marry me because you love me too. A tear slipped down her cheek. I do love you, Daphne confessed. So much it terrifies me. Does that mean yes? It means ask me again when you're not high on morphine, Daphne replied softly. Because when you ask me for real, I want it to be a memory you actually have. Deal, Greg breathed, a weak smile forming. And for the record, she added, I'm incredibly glad you survived. You and me both, he murmured. You and me both. She remained by his side long after he drifted off, her hand enveloping his, just watching the steady, reassuring rhythm of his breathing. He was here, they had both made it through, and Jane Williams was going to answer forever, trying to take that away. 2 days later, Greg was transferred out of the ICU and into a private room. Malcolm, fresh from his own hospital stay and ignoring strict doctor's orders to rest, came to visit. One of us shot, and the other nearly choked to death, all in the same week. Malcolm grumbled, easing himself into the visitor's chair with a heavy groan. This family is a certified disaster. I was choking Grandpa, not strangled. Greg corrected him from the bed. Semantics. Either way, I was knocking on death's door. Malcolm then fixed his gaze on Daphne. And you saved both our necks. You're building up quite the heroic reputation. Just part of the job, Daphne said with a slight smile. Last I checked, your job was slinging fish. Malcolm retorted, a twinkle in his eye. Or have you finally decided to go back to being a world-class surgeon? I don't know, Daphne admitted. Can I be both? Why the hell not? Malcolm challenged. Whoever made the rule, you can only be one thing, and you are Daphne Hampton, the heir to a medical dynasty and a staggering fortune. And at the same time, you're Jasmine Carter, a fishmonger and a cherished member of the Carter family. Why should you have to choose? Because that's what people will expect, Daphne said, her voice quiet. The medical world will want Dr. Hampton back, and the Hampton estate itself comes with immense responsibilities. I can't just, her words trailed off. Can't just what? Malcolm cut in sharply. Live your life the way you want to, says who? Society, tradition, the Hampton name. That name belongs to you, Malcolm stated firmly. You are the one who defines what it means now. If you want to perform surgery during the week and sell fish on the weekend, you do it. If you want to use the Hampton millions to support the Carter family, then that's what you do. And if you need to tell the entire world to mind their own damn business while you figure things out, you most certainly do that. Daphne felt a tension she hadn't realized she was holding deep in her chest finally begin to release. You make it sound so simple. Oh, it's far from simple, Malcolm admitted. But it is your decision to make, and that is the only thing that really matters. Just then, Patricia appeared in the doorway holding a bouquet. Am I interrupting? Just dispensing some grandfatherly wisdom, Malcolm said. Come in, come in. Tell this young woman she's allowed to do whatever she wants with her life. Patricia moved to Greg's bedside and set the flowers on the nightstand. I don't believe I'm qualified to offer anyone life advice right now. After all, I've spent years meddling in my son's life, and look where he ended up. Shot and lying in a hospital bed. Mom, Greg tried to interject. No, let me have my say. Patricia turned her full attention to Daphne. You saved my father's life, and then you saved my son's. You did it using abilities and knowledge that your cover story couldn't possibly account for. That tells me you've been concealing who you truly are from all of us. I wasn't concealing anything, Daphne clarified. I honestly didn't remember. I realize that now, Patricia conceded. But even after your memory started to return, you could have demanded we all recognize you as the Hampton heiress you are. With all your money and influence, you could have made us feel small, but you never did. You just stayed true to yourself, fearlessly honest, brave, and utterly real. She sank into the empty visitor's chair. I need to apologize to you for so many things, really. For misjudging you, for being so cruel, for doing everything in my power to push you away from my son. I was completely wrong about you. Utterly and completely wrong. Please call me Patricia, she insisted, or Mom if you feel comfortable. You are family now. It doesn't matter one bit how this marriage started. You are Greg's wife, and you're the woman who saved his life. That makes you one of us, period. Daphne felt a knot tighten in her throat as tears stung her eyes. Thank you, now Patricia said, her tone shifting to all business. What are we going to do about that vile creature who tried to take your life? Jane Williams' arraignment took place 3 days later, with Daphne seated in the hushed courtroom. Greg was right beside her, defying his doctor's orders from a wheelchair with Kenneth on her other side. The Carter family showed up in force too. Mama Louise, Dad Thomas, and DeAndre were all there dressed as if for a Sunday service. Then they led Jane in, swallowed by a bright orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled in front of her. She looked frail, shattered, a hollowed-out version of the polished surgeon who had commanded the room at the gala a week ago. Miss Williams, you stand charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, specifically for the deaths of Richard and Diane Hampton, which occurred during the attempted murder of their daughter. You face 3 additional counts of attempted murder in the first degree for your attacks on Daphne Hampton and Gregory Daniels. And finally, multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. How does the defendant plead? The judge inquired. Jane's lawyer rose to his feet. Your Honor, my client wishes to plead guilty to all charges. A shockwave of murmurs rippled across the gallery. The judge leaned forward. Miss Williams, do you fully comprehend that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to a trial? Yes, Your Honor, Jane whispered. And you understand the gravity of the consequences. You face a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. I understand, Jane confirmed. She slowly turned her eyes, finding Daphne's. I'm sorry for everything. I know words can't fix any of it. And I know you could never forgive me, but I am truly sorry. Daphne rose from her seat. Your Honor, may I address the court? The judge gave a solemn nod. Proceed, Miss Hampton. Daphne walked to the front of the room until she stood directly before Jane. You murdered my parents, she said, her voice a steel blade. You tried to end my life. You stole past my name, 3 entire years of my existence. You made me believe I was a ghost. You bled my family's fortune dry to pay for your addiction. And you put a bullet in the man I love. Jane's face was a mask of silent tears. You want me to forgive you? Daphne's voice was sharp with disbelief. I can't. Not now, not ever. Some things are simply unforgivable. She paused, her resolve hardening. But what I will not do is allow you to poison the rest of my life. I refuse to waste this next 20 years drowning in bitterness and anger. I am going to live. I am going to be happy. I will honor my parents by becoming the person they raised, a healer, a source of comfort, someone who leaves the world better. Daphne stepped even closer. So no, Jane, there is no forgiveness for you. But I am choosing to walk away from this darkness. I am choosing joy. I am choosing love. I am choosing life. and I am choosing to let our justice system deal with you while I go and build something beautiful in the time I have left." She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I ask you to impose the maximum possible sentence, not out of a desire for revenge, but because this woman is a predator. She has destroyed too many lives, and society must be protected from her." The judge's gavel fell with a final echoing crack. "Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, Miss Williams will be remanded into custody without the possibility of bail." As bailiffs led a broken Jane from the courtroom, Daphne turned into Greg's arms. Together, they walked out into the sunlight and never looked back. The opening of the Hampton vault was set for the following week, giving Greg just enough time to be steady on his feet again. A media circus had descended on the estate. News cameras, reporters with microphones outstretched, every single one of them clamoring to see the miraculous return of Daphne Hampton. Daphne stood before the vault in the heart of her childhood home, flanked by lawyers, accountants, and a strange assembly of family. The Daniels were there, Patricia and Malcolm looking on. Even Brandon, who had been absolved of any part in Jane's treachery and wore his humiliation like a shroud. The Carter family stood with her too. Mama Louise clutching Daphne's hand, Dad Thomas beaming with pride. DeAndre captured the entire scene on his phone, and right beside her, there was Greg. He was out of the wheelchair now, moving with care, but planted firmly by her side. The lead attorney cleared his throat. "Miss Hampton," he said softly, "whenever you are prepared." Daphne stepped forward. The vault was a monument, a solid wall of reinforced steel her great-grandfather had built into his study 70 years ago. The biometric panel glowed to life. First authentication handprint. Daphne laid her right hand flat against the scanner. It flashed green. Match confirmed. Second authentication retinal scan. Daphne leaned close, allowing the red light to read her right eye, the one that saw the world for her now. A soft chime. Match confirmed. Final authentication voice activation. State your full name and authorization code. The synthesized voice echoed in the silent room. Daphne inhaled her own voice, emerging clear and strong. "Daphne Marie Hampton. Authorization code Nightingale." A low hum vibrated from deep within the vault. Ancient gears groaned to life, heavy locks disengaged with a series of thunderous clicks, and the immense door swung open. Inside was a small, climate-controlled room, its walls lined with shelves holding documents and archival cases, glittering jewelry boxes, and stacks of old photographs. And there on the very center shelf sat a single letter addressed simply to her. With trembling fingers, Daphne recognized her father's handwriting and lifted it. She broke the wax seal and unfolded the heavy paper. "My dearest Daphne, if you are reading this, it means the unthinkable has happened to your mother and me. I have prayed you would never see this day, but a father must prepare for every possibility. First, you must know that we love you more than words can ever say. You are our greatest joy, the accomplishment of which we are most proud. Not because of your intelligence or your talent or your success, although you possess all of those things, but because of your heart. Because you instinctively use your gifts to help other people. Because the world is a better, brighter place for having you in it. The Hampton fortune is now in your hands. All of it. The entire estate, the investments, the foundation. Use it with wisdom. Use it with compassion. Use it to continue the work we started to be a shield for those who have no defense. But Daphne, my darling girl, please remember this. You are not defined by the money or the status or the Hampton name. It's your character that defines you, the choices you make, the love you pour into the world, and the lives you change just by being you. It doesn't matter if you become a surgeon, a teacher, a fishmonger, or anything else under the sun. Whatever you do, let it bring you profound joy. Let it fill you with a sense of purpose. And always carry the certainty that your mother and I are immeasurably proud of the woman you are. Live with your whole heart, Daphne. Love without reservation. And never for a second forget that you are loved beyond all measure. Your father, Richard Hampton. P.S. You'll find a box on the bottom shelf, the one I set aside for your wedding day. I pray I'll be there to see you open it, but if I'm not, please know that my spirit is right there beside you, celebrating the magnificent love you have found." By the final word, a raw, uncontrollable sob tore from Daphne's throat. Greg immediately enveloped her in his arms, and she wept into the solid warmth of his chest. Nearby, Mama Louise cried softly too. Dad Thomas brushed away a tear. Even Patricia's eyes glistened with emotion. "Do you want to see what's inside the box?" Kenneth's question was gentle. Daphne could only manage a nod. The box was exactly where her father had promised, sitting on the lowest shelf. It was a beautiful wooden chest with Daphne carved elegantly across the lid. When she lifted it, she found two treasures nestled inside her mother's wedding ring. A simple, graceful platinum band holding a single small diamond, and a photograph from her parents' wedding day, capturing them in a moment of pure youthful incandescent love. On the back, in her mother's script, were the words, "May you find a love as true as ours." Daphne lifted her tear-filled eyes to Greg. "I think I have." A slow, genuine smile spread across Greg's face. "Yeah," he whispered. "I think you have too." That evening, long after the lawyers had cataloged the vault's contents, long after the press had captured their shots and vanished, and long after the Carter family was safely heading home in a car Daphne had arranged, she and Greg sat together on the grand steps of the Hampton estate, gazing up at the star-dusted sky. "So," Greg finally said, breaking the peaceful silence, "you're officially a multimillionaire." "No," Daphne corrected him gently. "We're multimillionaires. You married me, remember? Everything I have is yours." "But that was just for show," Greg pointed out. "Was it, though?" Daphne challenged, turning to face him. "Think about it. We signed legal documents. We have an official marriage license. We live in the same house. We love each other. At what point does the pretense end and the reality begin?" "That's a good point," Greg conceded. "So we're actually truly married." "We are absolutely 100% married," Daphne confirmed. Although what? "Although I'd like to do it again," she confessed. "Properly. With our families present, with vows that we write ourselves, with intention and pure joy and a real celebration." Greg turned his whole body toward her, his expression serious. "Daphne Hampton," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you marry me?" He grinned. "For real this time. The kind of wedding with terrible speeches from my grandfather and your adoptive brother capturing it all on his phone with your mom crying and my mom pretending she isn't." A laugh escaped through her happy tears. "Yes," Daphne said, "yes, I will marry you. And I'll marry you again after that if you ask. I will marry you every single time you ask me. I think one more time should seal the deal." Greg chuckled, pulling her into a deep kiss. "But I really appreciate the enthusiasm." They kissed under a blanket of stars on the steps of the house where she had grown up, enveloped by the ghosts of her past and the brilliant promise of the future they would build together. Daphne felt utterly complete. It wasn't because her memory had returned. It wasn't because she had reclaimed a fortune. It was because she had finally truly found her way home to the woman she was meant to be and to Greg. She had found the life she was always destined to live. The wedding was held 2 months later. 2 months gave Greg's gunshot wound the time it needed to fully heal. And 2 months gave Daphne the time to settle the Hampton estate and establish a charitable foundation in her parents' names. It took 2 months, but despite all their arguments, the Carter family finally settled into the beautiful home Daphne insisted on buying for them. In that same time, DeAndre's entire future shifted. He received his acceptance to Georgia Tech's engineering program, not just with a full ride, but with extra support from the brand new Hampton Educational Foundation that Daphne had quietly established. And within those 2 months, Daphne found her way back to the world of medicine. She split her time working shifts back at the hospital, and dedicating the rest to a free clinic she opened herself in East Atlanta. Yet she still held on to her Saturday post at the Westside Market fish stand. It was a spectacle that left everyone both baffled and utterly charmed. "You're a surgeon with a fortune," Big Joe would tease her every single Saturday. "What are you still doing that's slinging catfish?" And her answer was always the same: "Because I love it." Besides, she'd add, "This is where I met my husband. This place is good luck." They chose to get married in Piedmont Park, right beneath the sprawling branches of the very oak tree that had shaded their favorite bench. The ceremony was a quiet, intimate affair with only their closest family and friends gathered around them. Dressed in a vibrant purple gown, Mama Louise wept with joy from the first moment to the last. Dad Thomas escorted Daphne down the aisle, his face a perfect picture of fatherly pride. Kenneth stood by Greg's side as his best man while DeAndre captured every second of it on his phone. Malcolm, it turned out, had gotten himself ordained online just for this day, and he was the one who led the ceremony. From the front row, Patricia watched elegant in a tasteful hat, shedding just a few quiet tears, which for Patricia was an absolute flood. Daphne was a vision in her mother's wedding dress, perfectly tailored to fit her. On her right hand, she wore her mother's ring, and around her neck, on a delicate chain, rested her father's class ring from medical school. Greg was in a simple black suit, his expression dominated by a smile that hadn't faded for 2 solid months. When the moment arrived for their vows, Malcolm stepped back, giving them the space. "Daphne," Greg began, his voice already thick with unshed tears, "the first time I fell in love with you, You were saving my life in the back of an ambulance. The second time was when you saved it all over again by hiding me behind a stack of fish coolers. And every single day since you've saved me in 1,000 different ways just by being who you are. You are the strongest woman I have ever known, the kindest and the most courageous. You have lived two entirely different lives, and somehow you made both of them absolutely beautiful. And I am so incredibly honored that you've chosen me to be a part of your next one. He paused, a smile breaking through his tears. I promise to love every single part of you. Dr. Daphne Hampton, the brilliant surgeon, Jasmine Carter, the phenomenal woman who sells fish, and anyone else you might decide to become tomorrow or next year or 50 years from now. I promise to champion your dreams, to laugh at all your jokes, especially the awful ones, and to always, without a single doubt, choose you in this life and in any that might follow. By then, tears were streaming freely down Daphne's face. Greg, when I woke up 3 years ago, a complete stranger to myself with a scar that had stolen my own face, I was convinced my life was over. I thought I had lost every single thing that defined me, but I was so wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I was just given a second chance, a blank slate to rebuild a life from the ground up, to discover the person I was meant to be, free from all the weight and expectations of the past. She squeezed his hands tightly in hers. And then, I met you. This absurd, ridiculous man on the run from his own mother, ducking behind buckets of melting ice, who looked at me as if I held the answer to a question he didn't even know how to ask. You didn't see the scar. You didn't see someone broken or just some poor woman selling fish. You just saw me, and you chose me anyway. Easiest choice I ever made, Greg whispered back. I promise, Daphne went on, her voice regaining strength, to love you with the entirety of my being, with Daphne and with Jasmine and with whoever I might become. I promise to always keep you guessing, to challenge you, to stand by you, even if it means selling fish on a Saturday when you're convinced it's the most absurd thing in the world. It is definitely absurd, Greg chuckled, his eyes shining. I promise to be your partner, your most trusted friend, and this time your wife for good. For every day we have left, Malcolm's voice caught for a moment, with the authority granted to me by a quick online certification in the great state of Georgia, I am honored to pronounce you once again husband and wife. Greg, you can kiss your bride before she comes to her senses. Greg didn't hesitate for a second. He swept Daphne into a deep embrace, kissing her as the air filled with cheers and the rapid-fire shutter clicks from DeAndre's phone. When he let her go, Daphne's smile was so brilliant it felt like it could light up the whole city. Hello there, husband, she whispered. Hello, wife, Greg murmured back. Are you ready to finally begin our life for real? More than ready, Daphne breathed. Let's start now. Months later, Daphne commanded the operating room at Grady Memorial, her hands moving with unshakable precision as she navigated a difficult repair to a patient's chest. Suction, please, she said, her voice a study and calm. That's it. Now let's isolate that bleeder. One of the residents, Dr. Hampton, watched in open admiration. Your hands, they're like stone. How do you stay so steady? Practice, Daphne replied without looking up. In a past life filleting fish, you'd be amazed how much it has in common with surgery. A wave of laughter rippled through the operating room. Once the surgery was successfully concluded, Daphne changed from her scrubs and glanced at her phone. A message from Greg lit up the screen. Dinner at 7. Making your absolute favorite. Daphne typed back instantly. The thought of you cooking is terrifying. Greg's reply came a moment later. I ordered takeout. I'm not a complete monster. Daphne smiled. Much, much better. See you at 7 o'clock. Love you. Greg's final text read, love you more. Then a message from Mama Louise. Sunday dinner is at our house. DeAndre is finally bringing that new girlfriend. Don't you dare be late. Daphne's smile widened. Some things were beautifully constant. A new message popped up from Big Joe. Fresh fish shipment just arrived. Need you at the stand tomorrow. Daphne wouldn't dream of missing it. She drove home not to the estate, but to their penthouse. Greg had flatly refused to live in the sprawling Hampton mansion, insisting it was ridiculously large and that he preferred his own space. Their compromise was simple. They kept both places, splitting their time between them. As she walked through the door, the aroma of their favorite Thai food filled the air, with Greg arranging it on the table. How did surgery go? He asked, greeting her with a soft kiss. Hello to you too. It was a success. We saved someone. Just a typical Tuesday, she added. My wife, the life-saving superhero, Greg said, his voice thick with pride. My husband, the CEO who still can't be trusted near a stove, Daphne teased back. Excuse me, I made toast this morning. You created charcoal this morning, she corrected. I made an attempt, Greg argued with a grin. It's the heroic effort that truly matters. They settled in for dinner, sharing the details of their day. Greg was excited about a new property development his company was launching. Daphne updated him on the free clinic's major expansion. They were finally adding a dental wing. The Hampton Foundation officially greenlit the funding, she told him. We're set to break ground next month. Your parents would be so proud of what you're building, Greg said softly. I like to think so. Daphne agreed, her heart full. Later, they stood on the balcony, the glittering Atlanta skyline spread before them like a blanket of stars. Do you ever have second thoughts, Greg asked quietly, about turning down the Boston Fellowship and about choosing me instead of that next big career step? Not for a second, Daphne answered, her voice unwavering, because it was never a choice between my career and you. It was a choice between two different futures, two different versions of happiness. And I chose the one that had you in it. It was that simple. He looked at her, his expression searching. Even with everything we went through, the crash, the memory loss, all of it, especially because of all that, Daphne said, turning to face him, it means I had the rare gift of falling in love with you twice. Who else gets a story like that? Only us, Greg whispered, drawing her into his arms. Just us, she affirmed, melting against him. The silence that settled between them was a warm, living thing. Curled into his embrace, she gazed out at the sprawling galaxy of lights below. Her mind replayed the impossible odyssey that had led her to this moment, from the sterile, brilliant world of Dr. Daphne Hampton to the salt-of-the-earth existence of Jasmine Carter. A woman who sold fish by the docks, and now finally back to a Daphne remade stronger, truly complete. A thief in the night had stolen 3 years from her, had taken her parents, had erased every memory she owned. But what it left in their place was a treasure, the unconditional love of the Carter family, who had embraced her when she was a stranger to herself. The grit and grime of the fish market had stripped away her pride, leaving only humility in its place. She finally gained a new lens on the world, seeing everything from the ground up, not from a pedestal down. And somehow she had found Greg all over again. But her greatest discovery was herself, the raw, unbreakable woman she truly was, forged in fire and strong enough to weather any storm. Where did you just go? Greg asked softly. Just thinking how incredibly fortunate I am, Daphne whispered. Even with this scar, the lost memories, the fact that someone tried to end my life. No, he corrected gently, it's because of all that. Daphne's eyes met his, because every agonizing, terrifying, horrible moment was just a step on the path that led me right here, to this moment, to you, to the life I have now. And I swear I wouldn't change a single second of it. A slow grin spread across his face. Not even smelling like fish for a month. Especially not that part, Daphne laughed. That smelly fish stand is what brought me back to you. Don't you remember? The absolute best fishmonger in all of Atlanta, Greg declared. You're damn right, she agreed as they sat together beneath a canopy of stars. They were two souls who had defied fate itself to find each other not just once, but twice, building a future from the smoldering embers of tragedy and choosing love over fear at every single turn. And they were incandescently happy. Daphne had lost everything that defined her, her family, her past, her career, her very name. Yet in that crushing void, she found her true self, the unshakable core of a woman who was built to survive, a woman with the courage to start completely over, and one with the wisdom to finally understand she could be the woman she was before and the woman she had become. Don't ever let another soul tell you that you are forced to choose. You can be both a genius and be humble. You can be a success and remain grounded. You are allowed to be a healer who also needs to be healed. You can hold reverence for where you started while still fighting for where you are destined to go. And what matters most is this: moving forward is not the same as forgetting. It is the conscious choice to live anyway. It's choosing to find joy in the rubble of catastrophe. It's choosing to believe in love after your trust has been shattered. It is the choice to gather all the broken pieces and build a masterpiece. Because that is what warriors do. They do more than survive. They thrive. They rise. They emerge from the flames as something more magnificent than they ever were before. Just like Daphne, just like Jasmine, just like the woman who embraced it all and refused to pick a side. If this story found a place in your heart, if the odyssey of Daphne and Greg moved your spirit, if you are a believer in second chances and a love that can withstand anything, please share this story. Send it to someone who feels like they've lost their way and needs to hear that they can be found again. Drop a comment below and tell me what your single biggest takeaway from this journey was. Which moment shattered your heart? Which one made you want to cheer? I am so grateful you took this journey with me. Thank you for having faith in Daphne and Greg. Thank you for being here to witness love win, because it does. In the end, love always wins. Subscribe for more stories that have this kind of heart. Smash that notification bell and always remember you are infinitely more than what was done to you.